Chapter 413. Shanger was currently in excruciating pain. The lightning strike was excruciating enough, and the pain was coming from both inside and out. Needless to say, it was unbearable. The little fox looked pained, but she didn't make a sound as she endured the pain. The heavenly lightning was ferocious and was considered to be the strongest force of nature. It was invincible. However, the more powerful something was, the greater its weakness. For example, the heavenly thunder lacked follow-up power. After a few bolts of lightning, it weakened, and after two more, it was so weak that it couldn't be heard anymore. The lightning was initially as thick as a bucket, and then as thick as an arm. Now, it was no longer a threat. Goldie, on the other hand, was like a sky-devouring firebird that soared into the clouds, releasing flames in anger. In an instant, the dark clouds were engulfed in flames. It was as if there was a bright sun behind the clouds. Even through the layers of clouds, it illuminated an area of several hundred miles. Even the people in Reed City could feel it. Many citizens woke up in shock and saw the blazing flames above the clouds in the distance. It was said that fire burns clouds, but what they were seeing now was the real deal. Xiao Feigong came out of the Qiao Manor just in time to witness this scene. His eyes were filled with fear, and no one knew what he was thinking. "Father, that looks like..." Xiao Xing said hoarsely. "Mount Long Pass." Xiao Feigong nodded. It wasn't just him. The entire Qiao family was feeling conflicted and anxious. At this moment, a ball of fire exploded in the distance. After a few breaths of time, a loud rumbling sound could be heard. It was obvious that it came from the explosion of fire in the clouds. If they could see and hear it from so far away, one could only imagine how powerful it would be if they were nearby. The people of Reed City and the Qiao family didn't know, but Chen Ryuan felt it up close. After all, Chen Ryuan was a member of Jade Dragon Kingdom's Guardian. But now, he was cowering under the dilapidated building, his body trembling. It wasn't just him. The golden bear inside him was trembling as well. Lin Jin let out a long sigh. The most dangerous moment had passed. Even so, he still couldn't move. After all, while Lin Jin had some cultivation and his physique was stronger than average, he still couldn't compare to beasts like Xiao Hua and Goldie. He had just taken a portion of the divine lightning and had to use a secret technique to neutralize it for Shanger. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the pain Lin Jin endured was no less than Shanger's. It might even be worse. Shanger was currently sprawled on the ground, unconscious. But Lin Jin knew that he had done everything he could. Shanger's internal organs had been imbued with lightning energy using a secret technique. How she would use it in the future and how she would improve would depend on her own luck. Xiao Hua looked dispirited as well, but his condition was much better than Lin Jin's. After all, Xiao Hua had an yin-yang dharma body, so the split lightning couldn't hurt him. As for Goldie, the moment Lin Jin looked up at the raging flames in the night sky, he knew that the guy was fine. He was just in pain from being struck by the divine lightning, so he was venting his anger on the clouds. Big Yellow probably felt that the thundercloud above their heads was the culprit, so it was not surprising that it was blasting at the moment. Forget it. Lin Jin sat down cross-legged and used his internal vision to check his body. Indeed, he was in terrible shape. Lin Jin had been a little too arrogant, thinking that since he was strong enough to divert some of the divine lightning's power, it shouldn't be a problem. At a glance, Lin Jin's organs were damaged, and some of his veins were damaged by the divine lightning. His clothes were tattered, and some parts of his skin had large burn marks. Lin Jin looked pretty pathetic right now. Taking out a blood energy pill, Lin Jin swallowed it to slowly nourish his damaged veins. At that moment, the aura behind him surged. The door to the visitation hall appeared out of thin air and hovered there. Lin Jin was stunned. Then he reacted. He had forgotten that today was the opening day of the visitation hall. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin reached out and closed the visitation hall's door. His current condition wasn't suitable for him to enter the visitation hall. His top priority right now was to treat his injuries and dispel the residual lightning energy in his body. He could go back to the visitation hall next time, so there was no hurry. As for the visitors inside, it was good to let them communicate among themselves. The visitation hall was currently bustling with activity. This time, there were no newcomers, including He Qing, Black Crow, and the others, as well as Feng Ziqian and Zhao Jingyan. There were now 8 people in the visitation hall. Feng Ziqian had brought with him many rare beast materials, which he planned to give to the curator after meeting him. In addition, he had brought along many precious treasures as well. As a member of a premium country's royal family, it wasn't difficult for him to get his hands on these items. As a newcomer, Zhao Jingyan was well prepared as well. In the 7 days since the visitation hall was closed, she had been waiting anxiously. As the commander of Phoenix Palace, Zhao Jingyan had never looked forward to meeting a member of the opposite sex so much. Of course, most importantly, the curator had used his supernatural powers to reconstruct a phoenix egg from its ashes. This egg had become Zhao Jingyan's hope. Although she had her own speculations regarding the term nirvana, she still needed to consult the curator on the specifics. Hence, when the visitation hall reopened, she was practically the first to rush in. Filled with excitement and anticipation, she waited for the arrival of the curator. As the other visitors entered, everyone started chatting. Among them, He Qing recounted the feats of the curator's disciple, Appraiser Lin, such as how easily he evolved 5 pet beasts during the Jade Dragon Festival and the Dragon Selection Ceremony. The others listened with great interest. However, they were all waiting for the curator. Hence, after a long time, the curator still hadn't shown up. This time, the crowd couldn't hold back their curiosity any longer. He Qing was the first to speak up. Why isn't the curator here yet? With her taking the lead, the others started asking as well. However, it was obvious that no one knew what was going on. Perhaps he was delayed by something. Yi Yuzhou's state of mind was steady. At this time, he said this, although he also felt that it was strange. Following that, the visitors continued chatting. However, they were all talking about the curator being held up by something. The 8 of them came from different parts of the world and had different experiences, so they offered their own opinions. Of course, none of them were worried. They were just curious. To them, there was probably nothing in this world that could trouble the curator, so there was no need to worry about him. However, the more they thought about it, the more curious they became. What could have caused the curator to be late? Did anything special happen in the various states recently? Yi Yuzhou asked. He had been cultivating in Maple City's Friar Association for many years, so he knew a little about the happenings in Jade Dragon Country. If it was outside Jade Dragon Country, he wouldn't know much. Chapter 414. He Qing definitely didn't know. She didn't even know about the recent happenings in the royal capital, let alone other places. Jiang Ziki was the same. He had a mild personality and didn't care about other people's business. Besides, he had been hiding in the mountains and forests for the past few years, so he didn't know about the happenings outside. To him, the visitation hall was his biggest social event. Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild were often out and about the recent major events, but they probably had nothing to do with the curator. Old Tian shook his head. He wasn't the type of person to pry around. Although he already had a rank 4 pet beast, Old Tian preferred a small-scale rural lifestyle. To put it bluntly, it was more comfortable to be the king of the mountain and be the king of the mountain. As for Feng Ziqian and Zhao Jingyan, they were equally clueless. As they chatted, a long time had passed. Under normal circumstances, the visitation hall should be closing by now. The 8 visitors stared at each other in disbelief. The curator didn't come. Now that I think about it, that's strange. I don't think there's anything strange about that. The curator never said he would come every time. At this moment, Old Tian said this. It was an unintentional remark, but after he said it, he raised his head and saw everyone looking at him. Old Tian blushed and stammered. Why are you all looking at me? I didn't say anything wrong. The curator really didn't say that he would definitely come back. Everyone thought about it and agreed. Forget the curator, even they were the same. Other than the first time when the visitation hall forcefully sucked them into the rift, they had always walked into the rift on their own. In other words, if they had something to attend to, they could choose not to enter. This was the so-called freedom to come and go. It was just that, Out of habit, they would come every time the visitation hall opened. Not to mention, in their hearts, the opening of the visitation hall was a chance to interact with the curator. Every single one of them had benefited from the visitation hall, so no matter what happened, they were never absent. But the curator was different. If the curator had something to attend to, he wouldn't have to come every time. Plus, the curator never guaranteed that. Old Tian, what you said makes sense. Yujo was enlightened at this moment. That's right. If curator was busy, he definitely wouldn't be able to make it here. Old Tian, I wouldn't have thought of it if you didn't tell me. Black Crow laughed heartily. The others also nodded at Old Tian, making him even more embarrassed. Looks like I'll have to ask the curator the next time the visitation hall opens. Yes, but we still have some time. We can continue to talk and exchange what we need. Although everyone was disappointed, there was nothing they could do if the curator didn't come. This was especially so for Feng Ziqian and Zhao Jingyan. This was their second time visiting the living room. Originally, they had many questions to ask the curator, but now it seemed like they could only wait a little longer. Of course, they didn't know that the curator was really in trouble at the moment. Due to Big Yellow's fire bombardment, the thunderclouds above were dispersed, and the storm had stopped long ago. As a result, the night sky reappeared. The cool night after the rain was indeed great, be it the air or the scenery. However, Lin Jin wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. He realized that he had underestimated the destructive power of the divine lightning. Initially, Lin Jin planned to imitate Shanger's secret technique and use it on himself, but he couldn't do it. He wasn't a monster, so he didn't have a strong physique. Monsters also had ranks, but Lin Jin didn't. It was impossible for him to hide the divine lightning in his organs and make it his own. Fortunately, Lin Jin knew that it was impossible, so he didn't continue. He could only settle for the next best thing, which was to guide the divine lightning into a needle, using the divine lightning and dragon fire to temper this needle. Lin Jin was feeling his way forward, relying on his previous experience. If he succeeded, he would obtain a powerful artifact. But if he failed, he wouldn't lose anything. Lin Jin focused all this while. When he realized that dragon fire wasn't strong enough, he immediately switched to unrefined flames. If unrefined flames didn't work, he took the risk of using phoenix flames, which he was still unfamiliar with. This phoenix flames was obtained when he condensed the phoenix egg. After Lin Jin's nurturing, it had reached a certain level of maturity. Of course, his skills and proficiency in using it were still far from dragon fires. He had no choice but to use it now. A silver needle hovered in the air before Lin Jin. Bolts of lightning danced erratically on its surface. Lin Jin opened his mouth and blew gently. A crimson flame flew out and wrapped itself around the needle. The flame was blood red in color. It was the phoenix flames that Lin Jin had been nurturing for a long time. The flame looked more like a tangible liquid as it wrapped itself around the needle. After a while, the lightning still flickered. Lin Jin quickly took out 4 needles and inserted them into the needle. Although I've never refined an artifact before, if I were to use it as a pill, my pelletization skills might work, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. It was true that Lin Jin's pelletization skills were remarkable. Back then, it was his excellent pelletization skills and many lost prescriptions that saved the Sher family. Using pelletization skills, Lin Jin formed a ball with phoenix flames and melted the 5 needles into one, forming a large needle. This needle was 3 inches long. Not only was it wrapped in phoenix flames, it also contained lightning bolts. A small portion of the heavenly lightning was finally completely trapped within the large silver needle. This was equivalent to possessing the power of lightning and fire. From now on, this needle shall be called the Thunderfire Needle. By the time he was done, Lin Jin was drenched in sweat and the sky was starting to brighten. Before he knew it, an entire night had passed. Shanger, the little fox, was still asleep, while Xiao curled up beside her, slowly recovering from the damage inflicted by the divine lightning. Goldie, on the other hand, had been tormented for almost the entire night. Now he was proudly crowing on a rock. At this, Lin Jean smiled. Goldie had evolved. Before this, Lin Jean had been preparing for Goldie's evolution. Not only did he implant the golden crow's feather into his body, but he also fed him the precious 100-year cold cordyceps. Goldie was already showing signs of evolution, but Lin Jean had been too busy recently, so he didn't have the time to care. Who knew that after being struck by divine lightning, Goldie would go against the trend and evolve on his own? Currently, Big Yellow had also stepped into the 4th rank. Furthermore, this 4th rank was extremely valuable, even surpassing Xiao Hua's yin-yang dharma body. This was because after Big Yellow's feathers were blasted off by the heavenly lightning, the feathers that had grown back now looked exactly the same as the golden crow's feathers. This was a good thing, a great thing indeed. Divine lightning had the miraculous effect of cleansing one's body. With the help of divine lightning, Goldie's evolution was even more perfect than a perfect evolution. Even Lin Jean couldn't predict what he would achieve in the future. Perhaps by the time Goldie evolved to rank 5, all of his feathers might turn into golden crow feathers. Then, he might even be reborn and achieve the body of a golden crow. Chapter 4:15. Lin Jean still struggled to get up. Thankfully, the Thunderfire Needle had absorbed the lightning energy from his body. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for Lin Jean to stand up. Speaking of which, he was the one who suffered the heaviest injuries. If it were any other pet beast suffering from a worse injury, Lin Jean would be able to treat it immediately. But the problem was, if it had nothing to do with the pet beast, Lin Jean's abilities and museum of deadly beasts that he was relying on would be useless. Suddenly, a silhouette hovered above. Lin Jean looked up and asked, "Lord Chun, why haven't you left yet?" The silhouette hovering above was Chun Ryuan. He had been frightened for the entire night. Even when the dark clouds above were forcefully burned away by a giant flaming bird and peace returned, Chun Ryuan didn't dare to wander around. It wasn't that Chun Ryuan was a coward, but he had never experienced something like this before. He only dared to come out when the sun was about to rise. At first, he planned to leave, but after giving it some thought, Chun Ryuan decided to go take a look. If Appraiser Lin needed help, he could lend a hand. As for what Appraiser Lin was doing in the pit, Chun Ryuan had no idea why the thunderclouds were suddenly summoned, causing a thunderstorm and lightning to tear through the sky. He was just curious, which was why he mustered the courage to come here. Upon hearing Lin Jin's voice, Chun Ryuan quickly poked his head out and said, "Appraiser Lin, I was worried about you, so I stayed nearby for the night. Are you all right?" Of course, Lin Jin was busy, but it was good that Chun Ryuan was here. "Lord Chun, please come down and lend me a hand." After Lin Jin said that, he waited for a while before Chun Ryuan came down. However, Lin Jin could tell that the latter was very cautious as he looked around with a frightened expression. It wasn't that Chun Ryuan was ignorant, but after what he had experienced last night, the situation in the pit was simply too terrifying. Due to the lightning strike, many boulders nearby were char-black while some had even melted. It was a bizarre sight. The boulder above Lin Jin's head was long gone, replaced by a bowl-sized pit. Judging from the traces around, this was where the lightning struck. Chun Ryuan jumped down and saluted Lin Jin. Lin Jin said, "Lord Chun, please help me up." Chun Ryuan took a closer look and noticed that Lin Jin was covered in burns and looked rather pathetic. However, he dare not ask about it, as this had nothing to do with his status. If Chun Ryuan were in Appraiser Lin's shoes, he would have been dead by now. The fact that Appraiser Lin was still alive proved that he was much stronger than Chun Ryuan. Respecting the strong was a basic principle of life. Lin Jin stood still and said, "Lord Chun, could you please bring a message back to Maple City for me?" Chun Ryuan hurriedly nodded. Lin Jin explained. He had rushed here in a hurry, but fortunately, he wasn't too late and managed to save Shonger. However, White Ape's status was still unknown and his whereabouts were unknown. Lin Jin had to search for him. In that case, Maple City would have to make some arrangements. Not only did he have to inform his family, but Maple City's Beast Appraisal Association as well. After all, Lin Jin was the chief, so he couldn't just disappear without a word. Moreover, who knew how long it would take to find White Ape, so Lin Jin had to make arrangements. Yuan made a mental note of this. Don't worry, appraiser Lin. I'll head to Maple City now. I can visit an old friend there. Lin Jin nodded without asking who Yuan was going to visit. Thank you, Lord Shan. Lin Jin saluted. Without further ado, Yuan bid Lin Jin farewell and flew away. Lin Jin stayed where he was to regulate his breathing. Only when it was noon and the sun was high up in the sky did he recover a little. At least he could get up and walk again. Xiaohua was fine and Goldie was even more spirited. Shang'er, on the other hand, was still in her fox form, curled into a ball and sleeping. Lin Jin picked her up and caressed her soft fur. He knew that Shang'er was unconscious because she was going through a metamorphosis. This metamorphosis was significant to her, and if everything went well, Shang'er's realm might even improve by leaps and bounds. Looking around the deep pit, Lin Jin called out to Xiaohua, and the latter immediately transformed into his giant wolf form. Lin Jin grabbed Xiaohua's flame-like fur and flipped himself onto his back. Xiaohua leaped up and jumped out of the pit. Although Lin Jin had never met Daluo Temple's rector before, this deep pit and the remnants of the Thunder Seal spell were enough to gauge the man's strength. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the rector was extremely powerful. If Lin Jin hadn't arrived in time, Shang'er would have died to the lightning strike. If he wasn't mistaken, the rector must have a rank 5 pet beast or an equivalent strength. But no matter how powerful the rector was, Lin Jin wasn't going to let this matter rest. One day later, in the morning, Grassy Continent, Cloud Tower City. This was the border between Grassy Continent and Southern Continent. Although it belonged to Grassy Continent, the people in the city were mostly people of the Central Plains. Of course, there were many tall Grassy Continent natives as well. The city was bustling with merchants and merchants. Cloud Tower City didn't belong to any country in Grassy Continent. Because of its proximity to Daluo Temple, no country could claim Cloud Tower City as their territory. Forget Cloud Tower City. The 4 major cities around Daluo Temple had their own way of doing things. Of course, they were all protected by Daluo Temple for their safety. Similarly, no one dared to occupy the 1,000-mile radius around Daluo Temple. It was a testament to how powerful Daluo Temple's 1,000-year heritage was. Aside from that, most of the people here were Buddhist believers. They could even treat Daluo Temple as a Buddhist kingdom. Inside an inn in Cloud Tower City, Lin Jin carried the unconscious Shang'er in his arms as he looked out the window at a mountain in the distance. That mountain was called Daluo Peak, and Daluo Temple was located at the peak. White Ape was missing, and Lin Jin figured he must have been captured by Daluo Temple's monks. Hence, coming to Daluo Temple to demand his return was the right choice. The problem was, how was he going to get White Ape back? For the past day, Lin Jin had been recuperating while gathering information about Daluo Temple. Daluo Temple's image in the hearts of the locals was quite positive, helping the weak, upholding justice, and subduing demons. It was only natural for people to follow them. Lin Jin heard that many people had migrated here from other states just to live in Daluo Temple's territory. This was a form of prestige. Prestige wasn't something that could be built up overnight. Take Daluo Temple, for example. It took them 1,000 years to reach their current prosperity. To Lin Jin, this was a troublesome matter. His opponent was too strong, 1,000 times stronger than any opponent Lin Jin had faced before. Although Lin Jin was angry, he wasn't so impulsive that he would barge into the temple and challenge them. If that was the case, unless he had a rank 6 pet beast in his possession, he could forget about it. However, time waited for no man. While Shang'er could wait for justice, White Ape couldn't wait any longer. Based on Lin Jin's understanding, Daluo Temple had always flaunted righteousness and took purging demons as their mission. Regular demons would never end well in Daluo Temple's hands. Based on the time since White Ape was captured, 3 days had passed. How could Lin Jin not panic when he didn't even know if White Ape was still alive? Of course, Lin Jin actually had another option. He could give up, admit defeat, and leave, pretending that nothing had happened. That way, he wouldn't have to risk his life, and he wouldn't have to go against this 1,000-year-old temple. But Lin Jin couldn't do it. In this world, there was bound to be a bottom line. Coincidentally, this was Lin Jin's bottom line, and he wouldn't back down even half a step. Hence, in a situation like this, strategy and tactics were crucial. Chapter 416. After much consideration, Lin Jin decided not to go with his original identity. If he wanted Daluo Temple to take him seriously or even be wary of him, it would be best if he adopted a different identity. Curator's identity was just right. It wasn't that Lin Jin was boasting, but Curator's name had gained some notoriety among the villainous community. After all, his actions against Grassy Continent's Snake Country had spread like wildfire among the villainous experts. Of course, this was only part of the reason. Another reason was that if he were to make a move this time, it would be inappropriate for him to use his original identity. Curator could still find him. Moreover, he might even implicate Jade Dragon Kingdom and Maple City. But if he used his Curator identity, things would be different. Other than himself, no one would know about this Curator. Once he rescued White Ape, he would escape, and the people of Daluo Temple could look for him wherever they wanted. Either way, he would have a way out. After some careful planning, Lin Jin got himself a mask and personally drew a pattern similar to the one on the Curator's mask in the visitation hall. He had to change his clothes too. Once he was done, Lin Jin put on his mask, carried Shang'er in her fox form, and headed for Daluo Temple with Goldie in tow. Lin Jin could think of a way to get Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild to help, but he didn't have enough time. Moreover, Daluo Temple was far more powerful than an intermediate country like Grassy Continent Snake Country. Lin Jin could just open the visitation hall and hide inside, but it would be troublesome if he brought others along. More importantly, Lin Jin was no longer the same person he used to be. His strength had far surpassed Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild, so if he couldn't handle this, calling others over would only drag them down. He had to deal with his own problems. After a day of rest, Lin Jin was back to his peak condition. It was early in the morning, so there weren't many visitors and believers heading for Daluo Temple. The mountain path was quiet. Admittedly, there was a reason why a 1,000-year-old temple was chosen. Not only was Daluo Peak beautiful, but the terrain was also perfect with a pleasant climate. Because he was wearing a mask, carrying a fox, and followed by a large rooster. No matter where he went, his appearance was rather eye-catching. Hence, although there weren't many people on the mountain path, they all turned to look at him. Some even whispered to each other and pointed at him. Ignoring them, Lin Jin followed the winding stone steps up to the top of the mountain. The 1,000-year-old ancient temple truly lived up to its name. Just this mountain gate alone was extraordinary. At this moment, more than 10 young monks were sweeping the ground and splashing water in front of the wide mountain gate. It looked very clean. Lin Jin took a deep breath. Carrying Shang'er with his left arm, he extended his right hand and pressed down. To put it bluntly, Lin Jin was here to punish them, so there was no need to be polite. Moreover, he had to make Daluo Temple wary and take him seriously. He had to make them understand that they were messing with a formidable opponent. Hence, Lin Jin had to use his strongest attack. He had to exert his dominance and make Daluo Temple wary. But at the same time, he couldn't hurt the other party, and he couldn't force the other party to make a move. Therefore, he had to know his limits. Lin Jin pushed his beast deterrence ability to its limits. In an instant, he even opened the visitation hall's door behind him to augment his aura. The moment Lin Jin pressed his hand down, an invisible force enveloped the entire Daluo Peak. The monks of Daluo Temple had pet beasts too. In an instant, almost all the pet beasts in the temple trembled and knelt in submission. No matter how their masters called out to them, these pet beasts didn't dare to move. It was as if they were being forcefully pressed to the ground by an invisible force. It wasn't just inside the temple. Outside the temple, as if someone had pressed the pause button, the chirping of insects and chirping of birds fell silent. It was a strange feeling. The monks sweeping the ground immediately noticed it and were at a loss for what to do. As a 1,000-year-old temple, Daluo Temple had its own experts. Upon seeing this, they immediately knew that an expert had cast a spell and was doing this on purpose. There was chaos in the temple at first, but it soon calmed down. Lin Jin didn't have to wait for long before he saw many monks coming out of the temple. The one leading them was a benevolent-looking old monk. The old monk's robes were simple, and his kasaya wasn't glowing either. However, there was an indescribable aura around him. From what Lin Jin could see, the old monk was wearing a 9-beaded bracelet that seemed to carry an aura of power. Other than that, the old monk must have cultivated the Beastmaster scroll to a high level. The monks behind the old monk weren't average people either. At this, the monk sweeping the floor by the door, who was in a daze, quickly bowed and addressed him as Master Abbot. An abbot was a room of 10 square feet. He was the monk with the highest status in the temple and could be considered the leader. When Lin Jin heard him address him as abbot, he knew that his strategy had worked. He had unleashed a powerful attack right from the start, but he did not harm anyone, only intimidating the beasts. The higher one's cultivation base and a more knowledgeable one was, the more they would know how amazing this attack of his was, so they would definitely not dare to take it lightly. The fact that the abbot had shown up was proof enough. Lin Jin had established his dominance without shedding all pretenses of cordiality. His goal had been achieved. Lin Jin retracted his hand and gently stroked the fox's fur. With his mask on, he exuded a mysterious aura. On the other hand, Goldie, who was chomping away at bugs beside him, was a bit of a killjoy. However, this uncoordinated combination only made it more difficult to fathom. "Sir, may I know what brings you to our Daluo temple?" The abbot's voice was loud and dignified. Lin Jin didn't answer him. Instead, he stroked the little fox in his arms and said, "Daluo temple has been around for thousands of years. Of course, we have a deep foundation. Master Abbot, you must be an accomplished monk as well. May I ask, what do you see in my arms?" Lin Jin asked in return. This was Lin Jin's strategy. Who cared what they were doing? They had to follow Lin Jin's lead. Otherwise, it would have been pointless to expend so much spirit energy to create such an intimidating presence. This time, Lin Jin was going to judge Daluo Temple in a superior manner. The abbot was stunned by Lin Jin's question. As Daluo Temple's abbot, his judgment wasn't something an average person could compare to. Although monks didn't care much for the title of beast appraiser, part of what they learned was actually beast appraisers. Hence, the abbot could tell from the beginning that the creature in the man's arms was a mature fox spirit. However, it seemed to be in a deep slumber due to its injuries. When he thought about how the man didn't seem friendly and was carrying an injured fox spirit, it seemed like he was here to interrogate them. After all, Daluo Temple rarely had anyone dare to come here to interrogate them. While there have been cases in the past few centuries, this man was the first one in the past century. The abbot was able to become an abbot not only because of his high cultivation, wide knowledge, and experience, but also because he was able to keep his composure. Having a bad-tempered monk behind him was already irritating. Chapter 417. After all, things had been too smooth for Daluo Temple for the past 100 years. Not only had they reached the peak of their development, but no one dared to go head-on against Daluo Temple, and no one dared to criticize them either. Even the most powerful countries treated Daluo Temple with the utmost respect. Because of this, the monks of Daluo Temple developed an arrogant temperament. They couldn't stand others criticizing them. Not to mention talking about their faults, even the slightest bit of disrespect towards them would make them angry. However, with the abbot around, they dared not do anything. The abbot smiled. "Sir, if I'm not mistaken, the creature in your arms is a fox spirit." "You have a good eye, Master Abbot," Lin Jin said in a deep voice. Then, he asked, "May I know who is the rector of your exorcism hall?" The sudden change of topic caused many people to not be able to react in time. Those who did react all furrowed their brows. They were already certain that this person was here to cause trouble. "Master Abbot, this person doesn't seem friendly. Why should he be nice to him?" A monk said angrily. Before he could finish, the abbot raised a hand to stop him. "The rector of Exorcism Hall is my junior, Jujun. He returned to the temple a few days ago and is currently recuperating. I know that you are an expert, so please state your purpose in coming here." There's no need to beat around the bush. It was obvious that the abbot didn't want to beat around the bush. Lin Jin said nothing. However, the invisible pressure he was exerting was even more intense. After a long while, Lin Jin broke the silence. There's a wealthy family called the Qiao family in Reed City of Jade Dragon Kingdom. They have an ancestral heirloom, and the Qiao family has always behaved according to the rules. However, they were targeted by villains. Lin Jin was recounting the entire story of the incident. Lin Jin only picked out the main points and explained the situation in a few words. You can call me curator. You can call me curator. The fox demon in your arms is my grand disciple. My other grand disciple is a white ape demon. Even though they are demons, they practice righteousness and have never harmed anyone. The reason they went to the Qiao family was to defend against thieves and protect the people. I never thought that they would be harmed by the eminent monks of Daluo Temple. If I hadn't arrived in time, this grand disciple of mine would have died under the heavenly thunder curse of Daluo Temple. My disciple is also injured and is currently recuperating. So, Master Abbot, what is the purpose of my visit to Daluo Temple? Lin Jin spoke slowly, and at the end, he enunciated each word clearly. Not only were Lin Jin and the monks present here, but there were also many worshippers watching from afar. Lin Jin's voice was loud and sincere. The monks of Daluo Temple were stunned. If what this self-proclaimed curator said was true, then Daluo Temple was indeed taking the side of the wicked. Moreover, they had clearly heard the heavenly thunder curse just now. Even though the curator did not explain how he dispelled it, there was no doubt that his methods were extraordinary. After all, the heavenly thunder curse was extremely rare even in Daluo Temple. It was impossible for them to dispel it, at least in their eyes. The abbot was frowning. He was a veteran. The others might not understand the lethality of this curator, but he did. The other party was accusing Daluo Temple of wrongdoing. Curator, based on what you've said, the cultivators of Daluo Temple have been accused of not caring about right and wrong and taking the side of the wicked. If that's the case, then Daluo Temple is indeed in the wrong. But these are only your words. There's no proof. Since you've come here alone, you must have something to rely on. However, Daluo Temple isn't a place to be slandered. Curator, even if you're an expert, you have to explain yourself or I won't let you pass. The abbot's aura surged. The monks behind him were already annoyed. Now that they heard the man's words and how he was slandering the reputation of their 1,000-year-old temple, they couldn't hold it in any longer. You demon, the abbot has a good temper and will not be calculative with you. However, I will not allow you to spout nonsense here. You have the fox demon with you, so you must be up to no good. I will take you down first, then I will kill you to restore the peace of Daluo Temple. Having said that, the hot-tempered monk leaped out. His arms were bare, and there was a lion and tiger tattoo on his shoulder and chest. There was a faint roar of a lion and tiger on the tattoo. Zhizhang don't. Although the abbot tried to stop him, he was just saying it. He didn't actually make a move. It was obvious that the other party had a tacit understanding and was just putting on a show. Knowing that this curator didn't come with good intentions, it was better to test his strength first. Even though the pressure was strong, it was probably due to the help of some kind of ritual implement. The monk named Zhizhang was tall and strong with thick eyebrows and angry eyes. He looked just like the angry guardian Vajra painted on the walls of Buddhist sections. Right now, he was holding a sun and moon scepter ready to strike. Lin Jin knew the other party would test him, and sure enough, he did. In an instant, Lin Jin observed the lion and tiger tattoo on the monk's body with his beast appraisal skills and determined that this was a liger beast. Ligers were native to Nanjiang and were large in size and unusually ferocious. This monk had fused the Beastmaster's second scroll into his body, which was how he gained such tyrannical strength. It was easy for Lin Jin to defeat him, but how to win in order to further intimidate the other party was a different matter altogether. It would be best if Lin Jin could shatter the other party's ambition and fighting spirit in one fell swoop. By doing so, Lin Jin could make an example out of him so that the others in Daluo Temple wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Lin Jin wanted a one-on-one battle like this. If they all came at him at the same time, he would be in trouble. Lin Jin was well-versed in the Beastmaster scroll. After all, he had learned the 4 most powerful scrolls. He was familiar with the second scroll as well. If he could instantly break through the other party's Beastmaster scroll, he should be able to do it. As his thoughts raced, the monk's sun and moon scepter was already flying toward him. Lin Jin raised a finger. A silver needle flew out, piercing through the monk's shoulder at lightning speed. Break! With a soft cry, it seemed like a light tap of his finger. But when it landed on Zhizhang, an incredible force erupted. With a loud bang, Zhizhang's Beastmaster's second scroll was instantly broken. It was as if someone had stripped him naked. Almost at the same time, a huge liger beast emerged from the other party's body. Monk Zhizhang felt as if 90% of his strength had been sucked out of him in an instant. He could no longer hold on to the extremely heavy sun and moon scepter, and it slipped out of his hands. His body also turned numb from the piercing of the silver needles, causing him to fall stiffly to the ground. As for the liger beast that had escaped, it was now subservient to Lin Jin, not daring to act recklessly. It was simple, almost effortless. Before Daluo Temple could even unleash his might, Zhizhang of Daluo Temple had been defeated. And it was such a thorough and humiliating defeat. The monks of Daluo Temple were in an uproar. Some of the monks were about to step forward when Lin Jin called for Goldie. Goldie immediately flapped his wings and transformed into a giant firebird to block the monks. Chapter 4:18. Although Goldie was still far from reaching the level of a real golden crow, it was already a prototype. In addition, Goldie was already on the verge of evolution. After being stimulated by the divine lightning, he broke through to rank 4. Goldie now had no one to form a blood pact with, and he wasn't a monster either. Instead, he had the bloodline of a true golden crow. Despite being only rank 4, his true strength was on par with a rank 5. That was why Lin Jin had the confidence to come to Daluo Temple. Daluo Temple's monks stopped in their tracks in fear. When they saw the rooster earlier, they could tell that it was no ordinary rooster, but they didn't expect it to be this powerful. Buddha's light of wisdom, deity capturing guardian. The abbot wore a solemn expression. In the next instant, a brilliant ray of light shot out from the prayer beads in his hand. Following that, a thunderous drumming sounded and the ground was covered in fog. When the fog dissipated, an armored guardian beast with the body of an eagle and the body of a human appeared. It was about 3 feet tall and wielded 2 golden hammers. This guardian beast belonged to the Buddhist sect and was said to be a ferocious beast that was enlightened by Buddha. Not only was the eagle-headed guardian huge, but it was also clad in golden armor and wielded a war hammer. There was even a golden crown on its head. Lin Jin's eyelids twitched under his mask. Daluo Temple was truly something else. Curator, you should leave. Daluo Temple will not hold this against you. The abbot performed a Buddhist salute on the stairs. Lin Jin smirked. Now was not the time to cower, nor could he back down. From the moment the monk made his move to the moment the abbot summoned this guardian beast with a secret Buddhist spell, neither side had truly fallen out with the other. They were just trying to increase the stakes for their side. Just like how before 2 countries went to war, they had to set up a battle formation. Although the battle hadn't started yet, this was the most important battle. It was a battle to see who had the most trump cards and who would cower first. Lin Jin was sure that Daluo Temple was filled with experts. If he were to fight them openly, forget rescuing White Ape, he might even lose his life here. However, if it was just a show of force, he could continue to increase the stakes. His purpose was very simple. He wanted to show his strength so that the other party would not dare to really fight. It was a bit like a nuclear deterrent. Daluo Temple doesn't care about good or evil. They kill demons whenever they see them. Yet, they claim to be enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Instead, they turn a blind eye to evil. Let me ask you, how is this enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens? It's not easy for monsters to cultivate, and there are also those who do good deeds. However, These things are not worthy of the attention of the eminent monks of Daluo Temple. I really don't understand. Your 1,000-year-old temple has thousands of monks chanting sutras all day long. Did your Buddha tell you all these? Lin Jin was already fuming with anger. Now that he had cast a spell to enhance his voice, it reverberated throughout Daluo Peak. Any monk in the temple would be able to hear it. Impudent and savage. The abbot was also angry. These words were like a slap to the face in front of everyone. How could he tolerate it? The monks were glaring at Lin Jin as well, seemingly ready to attack him. Some people had already begun to find reasons to accuse them. Audacious thief, you covered your face and brought a demonic beast with you. You must be an evil person. Master Abbot, please allow us to attack together. Let's kill this evil and restore peace to our Buddhist sect. The monks were agitated, and it seemed like they couldn't hold it in any longer. Suddenly, Lin Jin took out a talisman. This was the edict talisman Lin Jin wrote in Cloud Tower City this morning. Previously, Lin Jin had used the Divine Mountain Edict to suppress the Western King Cobra. This time, Lin Jin wrote the Vulcan Edict. The entire Five Elements Edict was something Lin Jin learned from Cloud Sect's Wu Qian back at Jade Dragon City. Learning wasn't exactly the right word. Wu Qian's research and understanding of the Five Elements Edict paled in comparison to Lin Jin's. Wu Qian basically gave Lin Jin a primer. Back then, he used the Divine Mountain Edict to congeal a mountain to seal a monster. It was so powerful that it shook the heavens. Today, Lin Jin was going to use a higher-level Vulcan Edict. He was going to show off his nuclear weapon and see if Daluo Temple was brave enough to face him head-on. However, this Vulcan Edict was much stronger than the Divine Mountain Edict. Hence, Lin Jin couldn't cast it with his own strength. Fortunately, Lin Jin had studied this edict on his way here. He only needed a powerful fire guide, and he had a 70% chance of casting it. Xiaohu couldn't do it. He had to provide Lin Jin with mana, so he could only turn to Goldie. Goldie! Lin Jin shouted. Goldie immediately chirped and spread his wings to soar above Daluo Temple. Lin Jin tossed the fire talisman in his hand out and invoked the Vulcan Edict. Edict, Vulcan Edict! The fire talisman flew out and attached itself to Goldie's body. Then, in his firebird form, the flames on Goldie's body burst into flames as if hundreds of barrels of kerosene had been poured on it. In the blink of an eye, the fireball was like a blazing sun descending upon the world. A gigantic fireball hovered above Daluo Temple's head. Despite the distance, the monks below could already feel the unbearable heat. As for the pilgrims and commoners, they had already scattered in fear. Confused, some cried out, "What a sin! The sun is setting." The entire Daluo Temple was in an uproar. Whether it was those who were meditating, praying to Buddha, or chanting in seclusion, no one could remain calm. There were eminent monks who could remain unfazed even in the face of a landslide. But in this situation, no matter how high their cultivation level was, they couldn't help but panic. Anyone who wasn't an idiot could tell that once this gigantic fireball fell, the 1,000-year-old Daluo Temple would be destroyed in an instant. Perhaps some monks with high cultivation levels could survive, but Daluo Temple would definitely not be able to survive. Hence, when he saw the curator unleashing his ultimate move, the arrogant and composed abbot could no longer keep his cool. "Curator, please wait. Do not be rash. Let's talk this through." It wasn't just the abbot. Even the monks who were clamoring for a fight earlier were terrified. Although they wanted nothing more than to tear this curator apart, they didn't dare to. Once he unleashed his spell, Daluo Temple would be gone. Of course, Lin Jin wouldn't actually destroy Daluo Temple. He did have this thought before. If Shang, and White Ape were to die, Daluo Temple would have to suffer the wrath of the Vulcan Mantra. But Shang was fine now, and her condition was improving. So as long as White Ape was still alive, there was no need for him to do this. After all, once the Vulcan Mantra was unleashed, he and Daluo Temple would have to fight to the death. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't take this path. The other monks no longer dared to act recklessly. Even the abbot was nervous. Although he was gnashing his teeth in anger, there was nothing he could do. Come to think of it, this curator was quite a powerful man. Up until now, he had only attacked 3 times. The first time, he knocked on the door and suppressed all the pet beasts in Daluo Temple with a terrifying aura. The second time, he attacked Monk Zhizhang. Again, he lifted his finger and broke Zhizhang's Beastmaster scroll. The third time, he summoned a gigantic fireball that hovered above their heads. If anything went wrong today, Daluo Temple might face its biggest calamity in 1,000 years. Chapter 419. The abbot was a smart man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have reached his current position. With a wave of his hand, the golden-crowned eagle took a few steps back. Not daring to threaten Lin Jin, he said, "Don't be angry, curator. Let's talk this out." Lin Jin smirked inwardly. "If I didn't use this Vulcan spell, you guys would have ganged up on me by now. Talk this out?" However, Lin Jin couldn't possibly fight to the death, so he smirked. "Master Abbot, what advice do you have for me?" "I wouldn't dare to say advice, but curator must be an expert from a Taoist school. That edict was truly amazing. I'm truly impressed." The abbot first complimented him and even changed the way he addressed him. The way he addressed him as this old monk was a sign of weakness. Then he said, "This old monk's knowledge of what you've just said is limited. Why don't you wait for a moment, curator? This old monk will send someone over to our temple's exorcist hall's rector hall for him to explain." Things would have ended long ago. Lin Jin grumbled inwardly. "I'll be troubling you then, Master Abbot." Lin Jin was now forcing Daluo Temple to negotiate. He wanted them to release White Ape and offer an apology. As long as he achieved his goal, everything would be fine. Now that the initiative was in Lin Jin's hands, as long as Daluo Temple was wary of this 1,000-year-old temple, they wouldn't choose to fight Lin Jin to the death. Since they couldn't fight to the death, they could only give in. Of course, Lin Jin had to be careful not to push them too far. Otherwise, they would lose everything. Soon, the rector of Exorcism Hall, Zhu Zhun, arrived. He didn't look too well due to the sword wound he sustained and had been recuperating for the past 2 days. Following the Exorcist Hall's chief seat was a middle-aged monk with a smile on his face. He had an extraordinary bearing. The surrounding monks all looked nervous. After all, there was a blazing ball of fire hovering above their heads. The heat was so intense that they couldn't even stand it. Some of the hay in the monastery was already smoking, and if they continued to roast it for a while longer, it would probably start burning. There were already monks running around with buckets of water. The moment the rector arrived, his pupils dilated in disbelief at the sight of the little fox in Lin Jin's arms. He obviously recognized her. "Junior brother Zhu Zhun, this is Curator. He came to Daluo Temple because..." The abbot gave a brief summary of what happened. "Junior brother Zhu Zhun, you have to tell us the truth." Monk Zhu Zhun was obviously dissatisfied, but the blazing sun above his head was no joke. He suppressed his anger and said, "That day, my 2 disciples, Jin Yin and Ji Yin, and I were passing through Mount Long Pass when a few people blocked our way. They said that there was a demon wreaking havoc in the nearby Reed City, and they asked us to subdue the demon. I asked my disciple, Ji Yin, to handle the matter. While waiting for him to return, I sensed that the demonic aura in Mount Long Pass was very thick. I went out to take a look and saw the demon fox attacking someone. We, the monks of Daluo Temple, could not sit back and do nothing. That was why we had to subdue the demon." Upon hearing Zhu Zhan's words, Lin Jin could guess what had happened. "Master Zhu Zhan, has it ever occurred to you that the villain was the one who called the shots? That the villain was using you?" Lin Jin asked before explaining what happened to the Qiao family. "Those people are the remnants of the Demonic Appraisal Association. They've been hiding in Reed City with malicious intentions, waiting for an opportunity to steal the Qiao family's heirloom. The masters of Daluo Temple happened to be passing by, so they became the weapons of these demonic appraisers." Lin Jin finally understood the situation. He was furious because he suspected that Daluo Temple was in cahoots with the Demonic Appraisal Association. But now, it seemed like that wasn't the case. However, This monk Zhu Zhen didn't care about the facts and claimed that the monster he encountered was an evil monster. That in itself wasn't right. It was too prejudiced. After saying this, the monks all had different expressions on their faces. Most of them came to a realization. If that's the case, then this is all a misunderstanding. Daluo Temple has always been famous for slaying monsters. Those demonic appraisal association scoundrels knew about this, and that's why they used this trick to sow discord and get someone else to do their dirty work. The abbot was a smart man. Once he saw a way out, he immediately stepped down without hesitation. Although it was a little embarrassing, there was no other way. They couldn't really fight to the death with this curator, could they? More importantly, this curator was too powerful. If Daluo Temple were to fight him head-on, both sides would suffer. Regardless of the outcome, the 1,000-year-old temple and its many halls would be destroyed. With the blazing sun hanging over their heads, they couldn't withstand it. Even if they used Wisdom King's golden crest, they might not be able to withstand it. Moreover, they didn't have the time to cast it. With Lin Jin's keen eyes, how could he not tell that the rector of exorcism was also heavily injured? If he was right, he must have been ambushed by Shang'er's object manipulation. Monk Zhu Zhen's physical body hadn't reached the state of being indestructible, so even if he could be healed in the future, his lifespan would be shortened and it would be difficult for him to improve his cultivation. In comparison, although Shang'er's injuries were more serious, with Lin Jin's care, she would definitely be reborn in the future and her strength would increase once again. Hence, they were on par. Lin Jin had initially planned to cripple this old monk, but now, it seemed like he was no different from being crippled. At this, Lin Jin responded in a friendly manner. Master Abbot, you're right. There's nothing wrong with getting rid of evil and bringing peace to the people, but not all monsters are evil. Masters of Daluo Temple, I hope that in the future, you can investigate more of these monsters. If you ever come across a monster that is wholeheartedly devoted to cultivation, please be magnanimous. Don't kill them all just for the sake of purging evil. He was basically teaching the monks of Daluo Temple a lesson. After all, these monks usually stood on the moral and intellectual high ground to judge others, teach them a lesson, and enlighten them. Now that they were being taught a lesson, it was needless to say how aggrieved they felt. But the problem was they had to listen obediently. After all, the atmosphere had calmed down, and it would be unwise to incite another conflict. Moreover, even if they wanted to, Master Abbot wouldn't allow it. Fine, they just had to listen obediently. Master Zhu Zhen, since it was all a misunderstanding, I won't pursue the matter any further. Release my grand disciple, White Ape, and I'll dismiss the edict and leave the mountain, Lin Jin said. However, Exorcism Hall's rector, Zhu Zhen, frowned and shook his head. That disciple of mine, Sheen, hasn't returned to the temple since we parted ways at Mount Long Pass. Naturally, White Ape isn't in Daluo Temple either. What? Lin Jin was shocked. His first reaction was that the monk was lying. Lin Jin's aura flared up. He even suspected that the monks had already killed White Ape and couldn't hand him over, hence why they were saying this. In an instant, the atmosphere tensed up again. According to the Qiao family, it was monks from Daluo Temple who came to provoke us. Afraid of harming innocent people, White Ape left the city to fight and disappeared after that. He only left some traces of destruction in a remote area outside the city. Now that White Ape hasn't returned after so long, he must have either been captured by Daluo Temple or killed by you. Am I right? Lin Jin's voice was cold. If these monks really killed White Ape without reason, Lin Jin would still fight to the death with Daluo Temple. Chapter 420. Lin Jin cherished his wings, especially those around him. Be it monsters or beasts, Lin Jin would never allow anyone to bully or kill them. If anyone provoked Lin Jin, he would fight to the death. Just like now, Lin Jin panicked when Daluo Temple refused to hand over White Ape. The blazing fireball above his head grew increasingly ear-piercing as the flames danced. Monks with low cultivation levels were sweating profusely as the heat reached its peak. Boom! Not far away, the top of a withered tree burst into flames. Black smoke billowed from many places inside Daluo Temple as well. Everyone was in a frenzy as they yelled for the fire to be extinguished. Curator, although Junior Juzhen has a strong personality, he never lies. It's true that Ji-in hasn't returned to the temple, the abbot said. He knew a little about this, but it was common for monks to leave the temple for a month or two, so no one thought much of it. Maybe Senior Yin was injured by the white ape monster, and that's why he couldn't return. A young monk couldn't help but shout from behind. The monk's eyes lit up, musing that this was a possibility. After all, Jin wasn't out on a vacation, but to deal with a monster. If he succeeded, whether he killed the monster or captured it, he would definitely return. But for him to not return for the past few days was very unusual in itself. Zhu Zhan's expression changed, thinking that this was a possibility. What if Ji-in had fallen to the white ape monster? Thinking deeper, this curator might have known that the white ape was the one who harmed Ji-in, but came here to make a false accusation, trying to blackmail Daluo Temple. That was possible. If Zhu Zhan could think of this, how could the abbot not? In an instant, the Daluo Temple monk's expressions darkened. Curator, it's true that our monk, Ji-in, hasn't returned. This is very unusual, so he might have been harmed instead. Curator, it's unreasonable and unwise for you to be so overbearing. If we go by your logic, Daluo Temple can ask you for Ji-in as well. The abbot knew he had to be firm, or else Daluo Temple's reputation would be ruined. Moreover, they were in the right. If they were to investigate this matter carefully, it might be possible that this curator was putting on an act. Lin Jin refused to believe it. He knew White Ape very well. If White Ape killed Jin, he would definitely come to help Shang'er or continue to wait in Reed City. There was no way he would disappear without a trace. Lin Jin was 100% sure of this. Having been with him for such a long time, Lin Jin was familiar with White Ape's personality. He wouldn't disappear for no reason. On the other hand, Daluo Temple might have killed White Ape and could not hand him over, which was why they were putting the blame on him. Daluo Temple, do you really think that I wouldn't dare to destroy your ancient temple? Lin Jin pressed his hand down, and the fireball above his head descended by 10 feet, its scorching heat descending upon them. 4 guardians, heavenly Buddhist seal. On the other side, the abbot saw that things were not going well and hurriedly used a Buddhist technique. The Buddhist beads in his hand all exploded. At the same time, 3 streams of light flew out. Together with the eagle beasts from before, there were 3 more divine beasts protecting the Dharma. Some of them were draped in silver armor and golden helmets, and some were wearing golden monk robes. It could be said that they were incomparably dignified and solemn. The 4 divine beasts were the golden-crowned eagle, the iron-armed black bear, the sky dragon, and the black tortoise emissary. The 4 divine beasts attacked at the same time. 3 of them worked together to create a golden canopy to block the Vulcan edict, while the last one charged at the curator. The abbot's attack was as powerful as a thunderbolt. Moreover, each of the 4 guardians was an existence that surpassed rank 4. To put it bluntly, they were rank 5 beasts, the kind that possessed magical powers. The abbot clearly had Daluo Temple's strongest combat power in hand. Besides the abbot, Exorcist Hall's rector, Monk Zhu Zhan, didn't want to be outdone either. He took off the Buddhist beads around his neck and cast a spell as well. Convert all beasts, Buddha's light illuminates the world, Prajna heaven, demon slayer's sword. In an instant, an ethereal sword of light materialized and slashed at Lin Jin. 2 of Daluo Temple's experts attacked at the same time. Lin Jin was enraged. Now that things had come to this, he couldn't just passively take a beating. Not only did he raise his hand and release the Vulcan edict, but he also raised a finger to release the Thunderfire Needle he had refined earlier. Using the Thunderfire Needle, he faced the incoming golden-crowned eagle. There was a deafening explosion. The stone floor in front of Daluo Temple cracked horizontally. The surrounding pine trees were instantly struck by the Thunderfire Needle, turning into ashes. The Thunderfire Needle unleashed its immense power, blocking the golden-crowned eagle's ambush. Not only that, but Lin Jin had also condensed his Heaven's Path sword intent. Using his finger as a sword, he shouted slash. Exorcist Hall's rector, monk Zhu Zhan's, materialized sword of light shattered. At the same time, his eyes widened in shock, as if he had been slashed by an invisible divine sword. With a scream, he fell to the ground. If it weren't for the golden barrier protecting him, he would have been killed by the sword intent. Even so, the Buddhist beads in monk Zhu Zhan's hand shattered, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Rector, Zhu Zhan. The group panicked. Monks, listen up. Protect the temple. Master Abbot was panicking as well. Knowing that it was difficult to come up with a foolproof plan, he could only yell for an all-out attack. Right at this moment, a loud cracking sound came from above. The golden dome that was held up by the 3 guardian divine beasts was now cracking under the bombardment of the blazing fireball. The monks of Daluo Temple were devastated when they saw this. We can't hold it any longer. Everyone run. The eminent monks were in despair. Although they were confident that they could survive the Vulcan mantra, most of the regular monks and beasts would surely die. Not only that, many of Daluo Temple's Buddhist halls, sutra library, and stupa forest, which had been passed down for thousands of years, would be destroyed in an instant. If the Vulcan mantra really came crashing down, the entire Daluo peak would be destroyed. From then on, Daluo Temple would cease to exist. Curator, please reconsider. My senior Ji-in is a righteous man, and he's cautious in his actions. He wouldn't kill monsters indiscriminately. White Ape might not be dead, but there must be some other reason why they haven't returned. Just then, Jin Yin shouted from the top of the stairs. He was a wise man who had been quiet all this while. Now that he spoke, he used a mystical Buddhist voice and a mind-clearing incantation to stop this catastrophe on his own. If they really fought to the death, neither Curator nor Daluo Temple would win. At this, the group felt a refreshing breeze blow across their hearts, clearing their minds. Lin Jin obviously knew this, but he had no other choice due to the circumstances. Now that he heard Jin Yin's words, he knew that Daluo Temple might not be lying. Once the Vulcan mantra fell, the number of casualties would probably be more than 100. He immediately used a spell to retract the Vulcan edict. However, even if Lin Jin wanted to, he couldn't stop the Vulcan mantra completely. At this critical moment, a mystical voice came from the depths of Daluo Temple. My friend, your spells are superb. However, Daluo Temple is my place of cultivation. It's better if you don't destroy it. Following the voice, hundreds of millions of fallen leaves rose with the wind, forming a gigantic Buddha's hand. The Buddha's hand formed a seal and blocked the descending fireball. The fire god edict that even the 3-rank 5 divine beast protectors couldn't block was actually forcefully withstood by the fallen leaf Buddha palm. The scene was so huge that it could blot out the sun. While Lin Jin was shocked, he quickly leaped up and invoked a spell. Retract. A half-burnt Vulcan talisman appeared in Lin Jin's hand. At the same time, Goldie flew out of the giant fireball. Boom! The fallen Buddha's hand was accompanied by the scorching sun's remnant flames, turning it into a curtain of heavenly fire. Forget Daluo Temple. Everyone within a few hundred miles could clearly see the burning Buddha's hand in the sky. With the crisis averted, Lin Jin frowned under his mask as he looked into the depths of Daluo Temple. Forget Lin Jin. Even the monks of Daluo Temple were dumbfounded. Most of them were at a loss for what to do. The earlier scene was too shocking. Even some of the eminent monks had never seen something like this in their lives. Then, the Buddhist voice appeared again. Since you're here, you must be a guest. Kongju, invite your guest into the temple so we can talk. Following the voice, an old monk appeared out of thin air before Daluo Temple's entrance. He was dressed in plain clothes, and it was impossible to tell how old he was, but he was at least 100 years old. After that old monk appeared, Abbot shivered in fear. It was not only him. Even the demons subduing Hall's Hall Master and the others revealed looks of shock. Grandmaster Xianju. Chapter 4:21. The younger monks were just shocked, but they didn't react. Instead, it was the abbot and the monks from the various halls who were shocked beyond words. The scrawny old monk lifted his bark-like eyelids, revealing a pair of murky eyes. "You guys, don't make a fool of yourselves in front of our esteemed guests." His words brought the abbot and the rectors back to their senses. They hurriedly bowed to the old monk. Even Lin Jin, who was watching from afar, was shocked. It was as if the abbot and the others hadn't seen this old monk for a long time. But soon, Lin Jin realized something. Earlier, the abbot addressed this old monk as Grandmaster Xianju. To be addressed as Grandmaster, one had to be at least 2 generations older. Daluo Temple's abbot was already close to 100 years old. How old would a Grandmaster have to be? Lin Jin was also sure that the expert who cast the Buddhist spell earlier, the one who chanted, was even more powerful than this Xianju. Who would have thought? Who knew that Daluo Temple was so full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers? But this seemed to be normal. If Daluo Temple didn't have a strong background, how could they have survived for 1,000 years? Based on the current situation, Lin Jin could basically confirm that Zhu Zhen and the abbot weren't lying to him. Jin hadn't returned, and White Ape was also missing. Daluo Temple wasn't sure about this either, so there might be more to it than meets the eye. If that was the case, there was no point in keeping Daluo Temple around. They might even need to work together in the future. While Lin Jin was contemplating, the old monk Xianju, whom the abbot and all the rectors addressed as Grandmaster, had already taken a step forward. First, he went to Zhu Zhen's side and gave him a pat. Zhu Zhen immediately felt as if he was bathed in a spring breeze. His meridians, which had been damaged by Lin Jin's sword intent, were now recovering rapidly. Then, Xianju appeared before Lin Jin in an instant. Putting his palms together, he chanted, "My friend, your swordsmanship is peerless. I'm impressed. Please follow me into the temple and have a chat with the revered one." Lin Jin didn't move. He was still considering whether he should go in or not. Without a doubt, if Lin Jin went all out and used all his skills, it wouldn't be a problem to force the abbot, Zhu Zhen, and the other monks into submission. Moreover, this wasn't a head-on battle. Instead, Lin Jin was using the destruction of the temple to force them into submission. If they were to fight face-to-face, Lin Jin didn't think he could defeat the 4 rank 5 guardian beasts. On the path of beasts, Daluo Temple's abbots, 4 guardian beasts, were considered to have reached the pinnacle. Even Lin Jin wasn't at their level yet. In other words, Lin Jin was risking his life by coming here. If he wasn't careful, he might lose his life. It was obvious that there were Buddhist experts in Daluo Temple who were more powerful than the abbot. Judging from the abbot and Zhu Zhen's reactions, they did not even know about it. This was a little scary. If he were to go in, he might not be able to come out safely. After all, he had almost destroyed the Daluo Temple. Just then, the little fox in his arms stirred. Lin Jin looked down to see that Shang had woken up and was staring at him with wide eyes. Other than that, the little fox's tail twitched. Lin Jin noticed that 3 more tails had grown out from the original 3. It seemed like the little fox now had 6 tails. The 6 tails must have been a result of Shang's internal organs being tempered by divine lightning. The museum's explanation for the secret technique was that it was an evolution method. Lin Jin caressed the little fox's head. Shang's status had been refreshed in the museum. After taking a closer look, Lin Jin smiled. All right, since they had invited him, he had to go. He would just play it by ear when the time came. After all, he now had 2 rank 5 beasts on his side. One was Goldie, and the other was Shang. Just now, Shang had awoken from her slumber and silently entered the rank 5 realm. With this, Lin Jin would at least have some tricks up his sleeves if he encountered any trouble. Especially with Shang's evolution. She was now a rank 5 monster. Together, she and Goldie were practically invincible within the same realm. "Master, you're too kind. Please lead the way." Lin Jin's mind raced. After thinking it through, he nodded at Master Xianju. "Please." Xianju stepped forward with Lin Jin, following closely behind. The abbot and the other monks exchanged glances before following them in. Zhu Zhen, who was killed by Lin Jin's Heaven's Path or Intent, and then saved by Master Xianzhu, could barely stand up. His old injuries had yet to heal, and now he had a new one. If it weren't for Master Xianzhu, he would have been severely injured, even if he didn't die. Daluo Temple was a little chaotic. Due to the Vulcan Edict, the monks seemed to be in a hurry. However, with the help of the temple's hidden experts, there weren't many problems. Even if some places caught on fire due to the dry weather, the monks would still be able to put them out. Daluo Temple was huge. There were 5 main halls and hundreds of side halls, including the monks' houses and meditation rooms. The temple looked like a city in the mountains. Xianzhu seemed to be taking one step at a time, but soon he realized that with each step he took, he would move 10 feet forward. Although he was still walking at the same pace, his speed was no longer the same as before. Lin Jin was the first to notice this change. Not only did Xianzhu increase his speed, but his figure had also become blurry. Fortunately, Lin Jin had some tricks up his sleeves. Clouds formed beneath his feet, and he quickly kept up with Xianzhu. However, the monks behind him couldn't keep up. Other than a handful of high monks who could keep up with Xianzhu, the others couldn't even react in time. That's fast. Unwilling to give up, one of the monks leaped up to the top of the wall and looked around. To his surprise, he still couldn't find Xianzhu. That's weird. Silence. That's Grandmaster Xianzhu. Even Master Abbot has to address him as Grandmaster. Watch your mouth. Senior, Daluo Temple's monikers have been passed down since 2 years ago. They are ranked according to Shi, Su, Kong, Xin, Wu, Fa, Ju, and Ji. This means that this Grandmaster Xianzhu is 2 ranks higher than our abbot and all the rectors. But why haven't we heard of him before? Our Daluo Temple is a Buddhist sect with a 1,000-year-old heritage. Who knows how many great monks we have produced in the past? It's not impossible for there to be a senior monk with the Xian name to cultivate in seclusion. Perhaps even the abbot doesn't know about this. Then, the Buddhist chants from before, don't say any more. That Buddhist chants were profound and contained great wisdom. I'm afraid a real Buddha has appeared. Buddha. The monks were shocked. Buddha was the pinnacle of Buddhism. He was a Buddhist existence of the highest rank. Just like the ancient immortals, he should have been long gone. One could only imagine how the monks of Daluo Temple were feeling right now. Although they had just gone through an ordeal that almost wiped out the temple, the fragrance of plum blossoms came from the bitter cold. They were about to receive good news. Chapter 422. Daluo Temple still had a living Buddha. This was definitely a piece of news that could shock the world. The Buddha was an immortal, and there were many miraculous things in the ancient legends. In the past, they were just stories, but now they had appeared in real life. The excitement and agitation in the hearts of the monks was simply hard to suppress. Even some of the old monks had looks of excitement on their faces. Everything that happened today had given them great motivation. From the battle between the abbot and the curator to the Buddha's intervention to neutralizing the blazing fireball, everything had greatly broadened their horizons. Even if they disregarded the Buddha, the abbot and the curator were considered remarkable in the eyes of the common folk. Of course, there were also the smarter ones who understood that the curator was no ordinary person. How could a monk with the Xian name invite a mortal? What did the Buddha say? He addressed the curator as fellow Taoist. Perhaps not even Lin Jin could have imagined that the name curator would be known throughout the world from this day onward. But that wasn't what Lin Jin was thinking about. Using the cloud treading technique, he followed behind Xianzhu. They passed through the clouds and arrived at a lake in Daluo Temple. The lake was not big and looked like a large pond. By then, Xianzhu had already stepped into the water and disappeared. Lin Jin followed suit and took a step into the water as well. With his water reservoir armor, he was impervious to water. Forget a small lake like this. He could even cross rivers and oceans. However, the abbot and the others who followed him here didn't go down. Although the abbot and the others had high cultivation levels and were protected by guardian beasts, they didn't know how to control water, so they couldn't enter the river. Senior Abbot, Grandmaster Xianzhu has brought the curator into the lake. What should we do? Wisdom Hall's rector asked. The abbot shook his head. Seems like this lake is where the Grand Master and Buddha cultivate. We can't enter without permission. Let's just wait here. After entering the lake, Lin Jin realized that while the lake didn't seem huge, it was actually extremely deep. The center of the lake was like a dark abyss. Xianju walked in the water while Lin Jin followed closely behind with his water reservoir armor. Xianju turned around and looked surprised. Then he nodded. Fellow Taoist, this way please. Further down, Lin Jin saw a stream of light. Looking down, he saw a strange fish. The strange fish was huge, with the body of a fish and the head of a dragon. As it swam, its golden scales shone brightly, and its aura was so powerful that even without an appraisal, it was obvious that it was a grade 5 exotic beast. Lin Jin mused, this Daluo temple sure is resourceful. If there's nothing else, I definitely won't come again. And to be honest, I was a little reckless this time. As the golden-scaled arowana swam over, Lin Jin took the opportunity to touch it and record it into the museum. With just a quick glance, he knew that his previous appraisal was pretty much the same as reality. This arowana was indeed a fifth-order beast. Further down, Lin Jin saw a huge bubble with a tiny house inside. Once inside the bubble, Lin Jin felt like he was in another world. There seemed to be some kind of magical power here that isolated the lake water. Once his feet touched the ground, Lin Jin looked up and felt like he was visiting an aquarium in his past life. It was a spacious area with green grass. Other than the house, there was only a tree beside it. The branches were slender and the leaves were emerald green. There were even banyan fruits hanging from the tree. It was an indescribable sense of harmony. Under the tree was a gigantic tortoise the size of a millstone. Sitting on top of it was a monk. The monk was dressed in a binar robe, and he was motionless like a statue. His skin and flesh seemed to be rotting. Lin Jin was surprised by how old a person could be when he first saw Xianju. But after seeing this monk, Lin Jin realized that Xianju was actually quite young. His age was indescribable. Just one look at him, and Lin Jin could feel the weight of these two words. Time. It was the word time. Apart from that, the old monk was shrouded in a thick aura of death. Lin Jin knew that this must be the revered one that Xianju mentioned. He was also the one who used his supernatural powers to gather millions of fallen leaves to block the Vulcan Edict. Lin Jin knew what he was capable of. That Vulcan Edict was a spell that he barely managed to cast by combining the Edict amulet, the Golden Crow's bloodline, and his Dragon Fire. In fact, if it was a one-on-one fight, Master Abbot could have killed him. He only managed to do so because he had the upper hand and pressured Lin Jin with his aura. Lin Jin could still vividly remember the Abbot's 4 guardian beasts. Hence, Lin Jin had been cautious from the start. While he seemed nonchalant, he was actually on guard. Xianju went over to the old monk and bowed. My friend, I know why you're here. Daluo Temple has been overly judgmental toward monsters in recent years. They've been asking too little about right and wrong, and there are signs that they've strayed onto the wrong path. Xianju, go and warn them. Have them reflect on their mistakes and turn over a new leaf. His words left Lin Jin with a good impression. Lin Jin mused, a true monk of Daluo Temple sure is something else. May I know who your teacher is? The old monk asked. Lin Jin didn't know how to answer this question. Speaking of which, he didn't have a teacher. His cultivation depended entirely on the Museum of Deadly Beasts. He only learned some edicts from Cloud Sect and the unending nature landscape by chance. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin answered half-truthfully, I don't have a teacher. I just happened to meet a Taoist from Cloud Sect and learn some edicts from him. Cloud Sect? Oh, I remember now. Although it's small, it's still considered a branch of Taoism. So Cloud Sect still has descendants. Not bad, not bad. The old monk's voice carried a sense of vicissitudes, as if he had been through the baptism of countless years. There was a sense of peace in his voice. I've seen your sword intent soaring through the sky with my Dharma eyes. It looks familiar, the old monk probed. The old monk probed. Lin Jin gave it some thought before answering. Master, I learned this sword intent from a senior named Dooley. At the mention of Dooley, the old monk was stunned. His eyes that had been like a pool of stagnant water suddenly lit up. Dooley? He's still alive? Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat. It felt like the old monk knew him. In fact, back in the unending nature landscape, Dooley was only left with an obsession. Strictly speaking, this ancient immortal had long since passed away. If this old monk knew Dooley, then they were probably from the same era. How could he have survived until now? Didn't they say that an immortal had fallen? How did this person manage to avoid it? If that was the case, then this person was a level 1 immortal. In Buddhist terms, he was a Buddha. At the thought of a living Buddha, even though Lin Jin was mentally prepared, he still shuddered. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if the old monk wanted to kill him, Lin Jin wouldn't be able to fight back. Fellow Taoist, where did you meet Dooley? The Buddha asked with a hint of anxiousness in his eyes. At the same time, the weather in this secret realm at the bottom of the lake suddenly changed. Not only did the lake water boil, but a strong gust of wind was also blowing. Chapter 4:23. The sudden change in weather made Lin Jin's heart pound. Judging by the situation, this Buddha and Dooley probably didn't just know each other. There might even be a grudge between them. At some point, Buddha had raised his head and was staring straight at Lin Jin. Just by looking at him, Lin Jin felt as if Mount Tai was bearing down on him and a flood was pouring out of the 5 lakes. An invisible aura swept over him. Lin Jin knew he couldn't withstand this aura. There would only be one outcome if he tried to resist it, and that was death. To protect himself, Lin Jin opened the visitation hall's door without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, the door behind Lin Jin opened wide, and a surge of energy surged out to stop Buddha's aura. When Buddha saw the door behind Lin Jin, he was stunned. His aura dissipated in an instant, and an indescribable look appeared in his eyes. But soon, his expression returned to that of stagnant water. The abnormalities in the surroundings also disappeared without a trace. Everything calmed down, as if nothing had happened. The door behind Lin Jin was still open, and the shock on Xianju's face had yet to fade. Of course, Lin Jin was also shocked, but he was wearing a mask. This was the benefit of wearing a mask. Even if you were wearing a look of disbelief and shock, to outsiders, you would still look as calm as an old dog. Xianju, please step back. I have something to say to this friend here. The Buddha no longer asked about Dooley. Instead, he spoke to monk Xianju with a slightly weak voice. The latter was obviously very respectful toward Buddha and would carry out any order he gave without hesitation. Xianju performed a Buddhist salute and flew out of the bottom of the lake. Now, only Lin Jin and the Buddha were left. Lin Jin had no idea what the other party was going to say, so he could only keep the door open behind him in case the other party suddenly attacked. Don't panic, my friend. I've known Dooley for a long time. That's why I lost my composure when I heard about him. Having said that, Buddha put his palms together and bowed to Lin Jin. Lin Jin could tell that this was a strenuous task for Buddha. My friend, when did you meet Dooley? Can you tell me? Buddha asked. Lin Jin had nothing to hide, so he said it was not long ago, no more than a month ago. The Buddha was visibly shaken. Fellow Taoist, please tell me the details. It could be seen that the Buddha attached great importance to this matter. After some thought, Lin Jin explained the gist of the situation. Of course, Lin Jin didn't mention the unending nature landscape because it was necessary to be vigilant. After all, it was a priceless treasure, and there was no guarantee that the other party wouldn't covet it. Even if this Buddha had a profound cultivation and didn't care for a treasure of that level, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't prepare it for Daoyuo Temple's disciples. Hence, it was always better to be cautious. Upon hearing Lin Jin's explanation, Buddha's expression changed slightly before realization dawned on him. Because Lin Jin's explanation was just as he had expected, the Buddha sighed and said, Dooley should be dead. 1,000 years ago, he was already at the end of his rope. What you saw was only a remnant of his soul stored in a magic treasure. However, Dooley's sect has many powerful inheritances. If you can obtain 1 or 2 of them, you will benefit greatly." Lin Jin thought about it for a moment and pretended not to understand what he meant. At this moment, the Buddha actually laughed. "Fellow Taoist, you might be wondering who I am and why I know duly." Lin Jin quickly nodded. He had been curious about this for a long time, but didn't know how to ask. Now that the Buddha had taken the initiative to tell him, Lin Jin was more than happy to hear it. There are some things that even Xianzhu doesn't know. Buddha's cultivation is all about fate. Fellow Taoist, we are fated, and now that we are entangled together, we can't be separated. Let me tell you about it. The Buddha then told him a story. 3,700 years ago, it was the peak of immortal cultivation. Daluo Temple already existed back then, but compared to other Buddhist sacred grounds, Daluo Temple was just an insignificant temple. The temple didn't produce any Buddhas, and there were less than 10 monks. Most of them spent their days ringing the bell. So how could they possibly be in the mood to pay respects to Buddha and cultivate? On the other hand, if a criminal committed a crime, they might come to this temple to seek refuge. They would shave their tongues and hide for a few years, waiting for the incident to blow over before going out to enjoy themselves. Back then, Daluo Temple wasn't a place for Buddhist cultivation. It was simply a place of filth. One day, a butcher who had committed murder hid in the temple overnight. Relying on his viciousness, he forced the monks to shave his tongues. From then on, he lived in Daluo Temple as a monk. Half a year later, thinking that the incident had blown over, the butcher sneaked down the mountain to look for his family. It was only then that he found out that his family had been murdered by his enemies. Filled with grief and indignation, the butcher found out where his enemies were and wanted to seek revenge. Only then did he realize that he was too weak. It was impossible for him to take revenge with his own abilities. During his half a year at Daluo Temple, the butcher read quite a few Buddhist scriptures. One of them mentioned the Wisdom King, which was the embodiment of Buddha's anger. After a night of contemplation, the butcher decided to return to Daluo Temple to cultivate Buddhism. At the very least, he had to cultivate the Wisdom King so that his revenge would be easier. However, it was not that easy to cultivate. This butcher had painstakingly cultivated for several months, but was unable to attain the Dharma gate. As such, there was no hope for revenge. Of course, he was in agony and despair. So one night, he could not take it anymore and decided to hang himself. However, at the critical moment, he was stopped by the abbot of the temple. Out of 10 monks in the temple, 9 of them were scoundrels. Only one of them was a good person, and that was the abbot himself. The abbot was merciful. He saved the butcher and taught him Buddhism. The butcher was too eager for revenge to listen to him. He threatened to kill himself and begged the abbot to enlighten him on the path of cultivation. The abbot did not refuse and taught him everything he knew. 10 years later, the fake monks who came to hide from the limelight had already left one after another. Only the butcher persisted. Furthermore, he had made some achievements in his studies and went down the mountain to seek revenge. However, due to the tempering of the Dharma, even though he still wanted to seek revenge, the desire was no longer as strong as before. After he went down the mountain, he searched everywhere and found out that his enemies had already died in the martial world. After experiencing this, the butcher pondered for a long time before realizing something. The abbot knew that he would go down the mountain to seek revenge, but he didn't stop him. In fact, he knew that his enemies were dead. Moreover, the butcher knew that his enemies were so powerful that even if he cultivated for 10 years, he would still be no match for them. By asking him to go down the mountain, the abbot was actually asking him to let go of his grudge and become a Buddha. Later on, he did cultivate to the realm of Buddha and strengthened Daluo Temple. He even befriended immortals. At this point, the Buddha seemed to be reminiscing. Lin Jin could tell that he was talking about himself. If that was the case, it would be too much of an exaggeration. 3,700 years ago. Didn't that mean that this Buddha was at least 3,700 years old? If that was true, the old Jade Dragon's lifespan would be exhausted after 300 to 500 years. That was ridiculous. The Buddha continued. The abbot was an expert. When he passed away, He said that there would be an earth-shattering calamity 1,000 years later. He even told me of a way to avoid it. It's because of this that I'm still alive today. But this is the end of it. At this point, the Buddha on the turtle's back seemed to have sensed something. He looked up, and his expression turned solemn as he spoke faster. My friend, Du Li and I are good friends. I acted on impulse earlier because I thought he was still alive. If he was, perhaps the two of us could fight him to the death. But in the end, I was thinking too much. My friend, I can see that you've reached the threshold of immortality, but I still advise you to give up and stop cultivating. Just as he said that, a terrifying pressure suddenly came from above his head. Lin Jin looked up in shock. Above Daluo Temple, a door appeared out of thin air, and from it, a beast's claw reached out. The speed of the beast's claws was so fast that nobody could react in time. Many of the monks in the temple were still cleaning up. At this moment, they were extremely shocked. In the next moment, the beast's claws reached into the pond in the temple. With a loud boom, the pond was destroyed. The surrounding halls and halls were destroyed as well. Even the people at the foot of Daluo Peak could clearly see that the gigantic beast's claw was too terrifying. Under its aura, all beasts within 100 miles fell silent. The beast's claw left as quickly as it came. Grabbing a clump of rubble and mud, it retracted back into the door in the sky. Then, the door disappeared as if it had never been there. Daluo Temple was in a mess. The abbot and the other monks rushed over at top speed, only to see that the pond in the inner lake had been completely destroyed. The inner lake was nowhere to be seen. All they could see was a deep pit. It was so deep that they couldn't see the bottom. Someone had already flown down. It was Monk Xianju. The bottom of the pit was filled with muddy water. 300 feet above the broken wall, muddy water kept pouring down and rubble rained down. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Below, a person was standing. The muddy water couldn't get within 10 feet of this person. Even if a rock fell, it would be deflected by a force. A six-tailed fox stood on this person's shoulder, its six tails swaying. When it saw Xianju descending, it looked wary. This person was none other than Lin Jin. Xianju landed and hovered in the air, looking around anxiously. My friend, where is His Excellency? From his voice, it was obvious that Xianju was panicking. Lin Jin came to his senses and looked up at the sky. His finger that was holding the needle was trembling. Chapter 424. Inside Daluo Temple, everyone wore solemn expressions. 3 days ago, Daluo Temple announced to the public that it would be closing its doors. The inner lake was sealed off and guarded by pet beasts. Even the rectors weren't allowed inside. Most of the monks did not know what the beast claw was or what it did 3 days ago. Only a few smart ones could guess a little, but they did not dare to say anything, much less discuss in private. For the past 3 days, the atmosphere inside Daluo Temple had been eerie and depressing. Inside one of Daluo Temple's rooms, Lin Jin was fiddling with a silver needle in his hand as he sat cross-legged on his bed, deep in thought. Goldie looked around while the six-tailed fox stared at Lin Jin. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and the little fox turned to look. Come in, Lin Jin said. Xianju and the abbot pushed the door open and entered. Only these two were here. They had been coming every day for the past 3 days. Lin Jin had already told Xianju and the abbot about what happened 3 days ago. Halfway through his explanation, Buddha seemed to have sensed something. Then there was a loud noise and a beast claw came down from above, snatching Buddha away. Even Lin Jin wasn't able to react in time. Of course, it wasn't that he couldn't react in time. If he really wanted to fight, Lin Jin could do it. But the problem was, after he attacked, he heard Buddha's voice. Don't interfere, my friend. Let's part ways here. If even Lin Jin could react in time, how could an expert like Buddha be able to? There was no doubt that Buddha allowed himself to be captured by the beast claw on purpose. But why? This question had been bothering Lin Jin for the past 3 days. Lin Jin told Xianju and the abbot everything. Of course, there were some things he didn't tell them as well. For example, Lin Jin's needle had pierced that giant beast claw. In other words, the Museum of Deadly Beasts already had information on that giant beast claw. But it was precisely because of this that Lin Jin felt afraid. Currently, the strongest pet beast Lin Jin had recorded in the Museum of Deadly Beasts was actually the golden crow. It was a feather he obtained from the Nine Heavens world that was included in the collection. The golden crow was a rank 7 mythical bird. Up until now, it was the highest rank. But 3 days ago it wasn't. Immortal devouring beast, rank 9. This was the information Lin Jin had collected on that giant beast claw. That was why his fingers were trembling. To the current Lin Jin, a rank 9 was an existence he couldn't hope to defeat. It might even be the highest level of existence. Lin Jin had seen the full appearance of this rank 9 immortal devourer in a museum. It was the largest beast he had ever seen, or rather a monster. If he really revealed his entire body, he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with a mountain. For the past 3 days, besides contemplating, Lin Jin had also been resting and waiting to see if Buddha would return to tell him everything he had left unfinished, telling him what had happened in the past 3 days. However, it was obvious that he couldn't wait for the Buddha to return. Not only was this the truth, but Lin Jin was also able to come to this conclusion after careful analysis. In terms of battle prowess, even if the Buddha was at his peak, he might not be able to defeat the immortal devouring beast, not to mention that the Buddha had already revealed the aura of death, revealing the so-called 5 signs of decay of the heavens. Even without the immortal devouring beast's attack, the Buddha wouldn't be able to live for long. Also, Lin Jin was trying to figure out why the immortal devouring beast would suddenly attack at that moment. More importantly, Lin Jin realized that the Buddha seemed to have predicted it. Xianzhu and the abbot had already entered. Xianzhu sat at the side, as the abbot didn't dare to sit. After all, Xianzhu was the abbot's progenitor. How could he dare to sit in front of the progenitor? Even when he accompanied Xianzhu here for the past few days, he had been standing at the back, not daring to say a word. Basically, he was here to listen to Xianzhu and the curator's conversation. Xianzhu sat down and asked, "Do you have a solution?" 3 days ago, the monks of Daluo Temple were powerless. The beast claw came and went as quickly as it came. Moreover, it was so mysterious that no one knew where it came from. Even if they wanted to take revenge, it was impossible. Xianzhu knew that the curator was no ordinary person, so he placed all his hopes on the curator, hoping to find a solution. Lin Jin didn't tell Xianzhu and the other monks the truth because there were many things he didn't understand. Fortunately, after 3 days of contemplation, Lin Jin had at least a theory. It might not be the truth, but at least he had a direction. Seeing Xianzhu's hopeful expression, the masked Lin Jin shook his head. Xianzhu's expression changed. "Are we just going to do nothing?" Lin Jin asked. "Master Xianzhu, how long have you been following Buddha?" Xianzhu thought for a moment before answering. 130 years ago, I met Buddha. Back then, I stayed by his side, secluding myself from the world to focus on cultivating Buddhism. Lin Jin nodded. Buddha must have been hiding in that secret realm at the bottom of the lake. There was a secret technique down there that could isolate one's aura. Hence, for the past 100 years, no one had discovered the secret of the lake. In other words, no one had discovered the Buddha for more than 1,000 years after he had hidden in there. Buddha had most likely allowed Xianzhu to enter because he wanted to find a successor. Although Xianzhu's cultivation level was still far from Buddha's immortal realm, he had cultivated according to ancient cultivation methods, so he was probably just below immortals. In other words, Xianzhu's cultivation was entirely based on his own abilities. In terms of spiritual energy volume, even the most powerful blood contract cultivator couldn't compare to Xianzhu. However, Xianzhu's cultivation method was no longer suitable for the current laws of nature. He had relied on Buddha to slowly build up his cultivation over the past 100 years. Now that Buddha was gone, it was impossible for Xianzhu to improve his cultivation level unless he changed his blood contract or trained his pet beast. However, even if he didn't do so, Xianzhu's strength was still unparalleled in this world. Even without his pet beast, He could fight the abbot's 4 guardian beasts to a draw with his own strength. From another perspective, Xianju was the one who had followed Buddha the longest. Master Xianju, do you know why Buddha chose to seclude himself in that secret realm at the bottom of the lake? Lin Jin asked. Xianju shook his head. He really didn't know the reason. There must be a reason why Buddha chose to seclude himself from the world. But since Buddha didn't want to talk about it, Xianju didn't dare to ask. While he had his doubts and curiosity, he could only suppress them. Lin Jin then told Xianju his speculation. From what I see, that beast claw that appeared out of nowhere must have something to do with the fall of the immortals back then. This was the conclusion Lin Jin came up with after 3 days of deep thought. It wasn't a sudden thought. Buddha might have secluded himself from the world because he had experienced the fall of the immortals, so he must have known a lot of inside information. The fact that he could survive until now spoke volumes. Being a smart man, Xianju said at once, could it be that the beast claw that appeared 3 days ago? He was obviously trying to say that the beast claw was related to the fall of the immortals. Chapter 425. There were no proper records of the decline of the immortal path and the death of immortals. Although there were many versions of legends, most of them were hearsay and wild imaginations. None of them were related to the truth of history. The closest one was the depletion of spirit energy, leading to the decline of the immortal path. Even so, no new cultivators or immortals would be born. Many of the great immortals of the past should have survived, just like Buddha, who had lived for more than 3,700 years. But in reality, other than the remnant soul of the unending nature landscape, Du Li, who was a real immortal, Lin Jin had never seen anyone else. Buddha was the second immortal he saw, and he was a living immortal. This meant that under normal circumstances, immortals should have been able to survive until now. Why not? Some people said that the laws of nature had changed, causing the immortals to experience the decay of the heavens. No one could withstand the passage of time, so they all died. But the fact that Buddha was still alive proved this theory wrong. Lin Jin speculated that it must have something to do with that rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Was it possible that an immortal devouring beast stronger than immortals had appeared, causing the world to change back then? Immortals didn't die of old age, but were killed by immortal devouring beasts. Otherwise, why would the museum give that claw the title of immortal devouring beast? Lin Jin didn't hold back on his speculations. He shared his evaluation results with his conjectures. Be it Xianju or Daluo Temple's abbot, both of them were dumbfounded. Unable to find any rebuttal, they could only nod in agreement. I noticed that Buddha was shrouded in an aura of death that day. He must be nearing the end of his lifespan. Lin Jin said. Xianju nodded. That's right. You're right about that. Buddha told me himself that he would pass away in 5 days at most. Once again, Lin Jin's conjecture was confirmed. It was my fault. If Buddha hadn't dispelled my Vulcan's edict, that immortal devouring beast might not have noticed. Lin Jin revealed an important speculation. Why did the beast claw have to show up right after Buddha cast the 1,000-leaf Buddha palm? The only logical explanation was that Buddha had revealed his immortal aura, and that was how the immortal devouring beast appeared. Hearing this, the abbot's expression changed, and Xianju was stunned. The 2 monks were silent for a long time. The abbot chanted the name of Buddha, and Xianju said, this matter may have something to do with fellow Taoists, but when Buddha made his move, he must have known about this. That's why he wanted to meet fellow Taoists. I understand. I can only blame myself for not thinking of this at that time. It was obvious that Xianju was a little upset. The abbot noticed this as well. However, he was not in a bad state of mind. He knew that the curator was not to be blamed for this matter. Buddha had invited the curator over for a chat at his last moments. This was a message to everyone in Daluo Temple that they were not to hold any grudges against the curator. They were all eminent monks, so they would definitely be able to think of this. Aside from that, Buddha seemed to have another layer of meaning to him. All 3 of them, including Lin Jin, could tell, especially Lin Jin. He remembered Buddha saying that he and Lin Jin were fated and that their paths were intertwined. Buddhism was particular about karma. It was because of the curator's ascension that led to Buddha's death. Their fates must have been intertwined, and Buddha was asking Lin Jin to take care of Daluo Temple. It's precisely because of this that I want to tell Master Xianju that there's nothing we can do right now. A rank 9 beast isn't something we can handle with our current capabilities. Forget the fact that we don't know the enemy's background. Even if we did, what could we do? Besides, if my previous speculation is correct, then how could an immortal devouring beast be able to annihilate all the cultivators in the world? At Lin Jin's words, both Xianju and the abbot's expressions changed. They clearly agreed with Lin Jin. If there wasn't just one immortal devouring beast, but hundreds or even thousands of them, forget Xianju and the curator. Even the combined forces of all the major countries in the world wouldn't stand chance. Even premium countries didn't have a rank 9 beast. Forget a rank 9 beast. Even rank 8 beasts only existed in legends. The meditation room fell into silence. Goldie couldn't stand the atmosphere anymore, so he jumped down and walked out of the room to catch some bugs. "You're right, curator," the abbot said as he put his palms together and bowed. Speaking of which, he was also involved in karma. It was his battle with the curator earlier, otherwise he wouldn't have. Lin Jin got up, and Shang'er in her fox form immediately followed him. Xianju asked, "You're leaving, brother?" Lin Jin nodded. "I've troubled you for a long time. I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you any longer." Lin Jin wasn't just making an excuse. He really did have something important to attend to, and that was to find White Ape. Of course, Lin Jin was willing to stay at Daluo Temple for 3 days, not only because he needed time to think, but also because he subconsciously believed that White Ape was no match for Jin. Through their interactions, Lin Jin learned that Daluo Temple had true experts. Putting aside the likes of Xianju and the abbot, even the rectors of their respective halls were formidable. Among the monks of the Ji generation, Jin Yin was the one with the most wisdom and the highest attainment in Buddhism. Ji Yin, on the other hand, was the strongest among the Ji generation. Although White Ape wasn't bad, he still paled in comparison to Ji Yin. Lin Jin had a feeling that Ji Yin might bring White Ape back to Daluo Temple within these 3 days. But he didn't. According to the abbot, if it was just to subdue a monster, Jin shouldn't have taken so long to return to the temple regardless of whether he succeeded or not. Even if he was delayed, he should have informed the temple through a messenger bird. But in reality, Ji Yin seemed to have disappeared and Daluo Temple was panicking. Hence, Lin Jin had reason to suspect that something had happened to White Ape. Since he couldn't interfere with Buddha and the immortal devouring beast for now, Lin Jin could only put aside for now and focus on the task at hand. There was one thing Lin Jin didn't tell Xianju and the others. Even if Buddha was nearing the end of his lifespan, he was still an immortal, so he shouldn't have been captured without putting up a fight. Hence, it was probably Buddha's intention. Firstly, he didn't want Daluo Temple's destruction to implicate others. Secondly, he planned to investigate the door behind the beast's claw and fight the immortal devouring beast to the death. That was highly possible. However, Lin Jin wasn't optimistic about it. The information that the rank 9 immortal devouring beast revealed in the Museum of Deadly Beasts was too overwhelming. Buddha might not be a match for it. Chapter 426. This time, Lin Jin finally witnessed the power of a rank 9 pet beast. It was indeed devastating. Thinking back to how he had the Museum of Deadly Beasts, his pet beasts were only rank 4. Goldie was also a rank 4, while Shang'er was the only one who advanced to rank 5 after being baptized by divine lightning. However, rank 5 was still a far cry from rank 9. It was one thing if he didn't know such a terrifying existence existed in this world, but now that he did, he had to be careful. This time, the immortal devourer had targeted Buddha. Who knew if it would target him the next time? Nothing else mattered. Improving his strength was the most important thing right now. Since Curator wanted to leave, Xianju and the abbot obviously wouldn't stop him. The two escorted him all the way to Daluo Temple. "Masters, please return." Lin Jin turned back and saluted them. He had come here to cause trouble for Daluo Temple. Who knew that after so many coincidences, he would end up becoming friends with Daluo Temple instead? Admittedly, fate sure was an interesting one. There's something I forgot to tell Curator. Just 2 days ago, many villainous experts came looking for Curator. Seeing how fierce they were, I had the rectors pacify them. For the past 2 days, they've been gathering at the foot of the mountain and refused to leave. More and more people have come. Besides the villainous experts, I heard that many experts from Jade Dragon Country have come as well. At this moment, the abbot seemed to have thought of something. He slapped his forehead and said, although Daluo Temple was just a temple, its strength was comparable to a premium country or even stronger. 1,000-year heritage was no small matter. Moreover, after getting to know them, Lin Jin knew that Daluo Temple's heritage was far more than 1,000 years old. "I apologize for worrying you, Master Abbot." Lin Jin saluted. "If I'm not mistaken, these people are probably here for me. I'll have them leave now." "That would be great." The abbot quickly returned the gesture. In front of Curator, the abbot dared not put on airs. Even Grandmaster Xianju was courteous to Curator. After bidding farewell to the two monks, Lin Jin carried the little fox in his arms and led Goldie down the mountain slowly. When he reached the foot of the mountain, he saw a large group of people in the distance. This group was not to be underestimated. There were quite a few experts among them. Black Crow, Madam Ghostchild, Coffin Man, Old Turtle, and Evil Scholar were among them. Other than that, Lin Jin even saw Yi Yuzhou and Chun Ryuan, the two guardians of Jade Dragon Kingdom. This lineup was enough to crush an average intermediate kingdom. However, against Daluo Temple, it was still a little difficult. The head monk of the 6 halls was able to fend off many experts at the foot of the mountain. The stalemate had been going on for quite some time now. When Daluo Temple's rectors saw Lin Jin descending the mountain, they hurried over. "Greetings, householder Curator." The head monks were very polite. They all knew that the Curator was a guest of the Buddha. Even Grandmaster Xianju addressed him as fellow Taoist, which was a testament to his status. Naturally, they were very respectful. "Thank you, masters. These friends are here because of me, so let me handle this." Lin Jin was very polite. Having said that, he walked over. The villainous cultivators had already noticed Curator and hurried forward. But when he got closer, Lin Jin was dumbfounded. Lin Jin expected Black Crow and Madam Ghostchild to be here, but he didn't expect Old Tian to be here as well. Old Tian's mutated demonic Tyrannosaurus was very eye-catching. Moreover, Old Tian hadn't cultivated the Beastmaster scroll, so he had no idea how to keep a pet beast. Yi Yuzhou and Chun Ryuan were also familiar faces. Besides them, most of them were unfamiliar faces. Lin Jin could tell that a few of them weren't even human. They were monsters with high cultivation levels. Why were monsters here too? Lin Jin wasn't joking when he said they had high cultivation levels. Since these monsters were in human form, it meant that they knew how to shape-shift. However, Lin Jin was sure that he had never seen them before. While Lin Jin was deep in thought, the large group of people came forward and bowed in unison. "Greetings, Curator." Although their voices weren't uniform, they were still earth-shattering and domineering. Lin Jin's aura wasn't weak either. Dressed in plain clothes and wearing a mask, he carried an obedient 6-tailed fox in his arms. He looked mysterious. Soon, Lin Jin learned what happened from Black Crow and the others. 3 days ago, the news of him visiting Daluo Temple as the Curator had spread like wildfire. There was no way he could keep it a secret. After all, the commotion at Daluo Temple could be seen from tens of miles away and felt it within 100 miles. Just a little digging would reveal what happened. Moreover, Lin Jin had questioned Daluo Temple's monks back then. Hence, news of Curators storming Daluo Temple in a rage spread like wildfire. The villainous faction had their own channels of communication, so Black Crow and the others were the first to hear about it. Hence, they rushed over immediately. After all, when Curator was unexpectedly absent during the visitation hall's opening, They knew something must have happened, so they reacted quickly. Yi Yuzhou and Chen Ryuan were the same. However, they told Lin Jin that they were here on an imperial edict. Lin Jin immediately understood. Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor, He Qian, had sent them here. Admittedly, He Qian was a decisive man. Moreover, he was so determined to get involved in something like this. After all, a single mistake could offend an existence that surpassed even premium countries like Daluo Temple. It wasn't easy for He Qian to send people here. At the very least, He Qian had expressed Jade Dragon Country's stance. Lin Jin was grateful for this favor. As for the monsters, most villainous factions couldn't tell what they were. They simply assumed that they were loyal warriors who came to help. So many of them showed up this time. However, there were also experts like Yi Yuzhou who could tell that something was amiss. Still, they assumed that Curator was a masterful person. Moreover, when he went to Daluo Temple, he had publicly reprimanded the monks for killing monsters indiscriminately and disregarding good and evil. Naturally, his voice of seeking justice for all the monsters in the world attracted the help of some monsters with high cultivation levels. The curator's name already had some weight to it. After the incident at Daluo Temple, it was certain that the curator's name would resound throughout the world. This was something Lin Jin didn't expect. Now that the situation was clear, Lin Jin's next step was to think of a way to get these people to disperse. Of course, he gave them some benefits as well. Regardless of whether he knew them or not, they were all here because of Curator's name. Some of them came from other provinces, and it wasn't Lin Jin's style to make them come here for nothing. After all, he had turned Daluo Temple from an enemy into a friend. What if he didn't? If he had to fight to the death with Daluo Temple, these people would be risking their lives to help him. Whether they were sincere or not, Lin Jin couldn't reject this favor. Also, Lin Jin thought of something. Since these people came from all over the world, it wouldn't be a bad idea to ask about White Ape and Ji Yin's whereabouts. Who knows, there might be some unexpected gains. Faced with these hundreds of people, Lin Jin pressed his hand into the air. A wave of beastly aura swept out, and the clamor immediately died down. After explaining White Ape and Ji Yin's situation, Lin Jin asked, "Everyone, you've come from all over the world. Have you seen or heard of them? Even if it's just a word or a clue, I'll be fine." Chapter 427. Lin Jin was just trying his luck. After all, he knew that the chances of these people providing him with useful information were slim. But to his surprise, he actually managed to obtain a useful piece of information. A villainous expert came forward and saluted Lin Jin. "Curator, I ran into something like this on my way here a few days ago." This villainous expert was dressed strangely, had a beard, and had dark circles around his eyes. Lin Jin didn't know if he was beaten up or born with this appearance. His pet beast was a huge vulture with a dejected face. Despite its huge size, it was listless and most of its feathers were bald. No matter how one looked at it, it looked dejected. Then the man began his story. He had heard of Curator's name before. Evil Scholar had issued a summoning order, so he rushed over from the neighboring South State. But along the way, he ran into something strange. "Curator, since ancient times, Taoists and Buddhists have always walked different paths. But the other day, I saw a Taoist priest followed by a rather handsome monk. It was very strange. That Taoist priest was old and ugly, but he was walking with a handsome monk. It's not that I'm being filthy, but it's just too strange. All right, there was a little white ape tied to a rope in the Taoist priest's hand." At this, Lin Jin's brows furrowed. The Daluo Temple's head monks had not left either. When they heard this, they were immediately shocked. "In terms of looks, that nephew Ji Yin of mine is indeed a talented man. Could the person following behind that old Taoist be nephew Ji Yin?" Prajnahal's head monk asked at this moment. However, the villainous expert didn't give Daluo Temple's monk any face and ignored Prajnahal's rector's question. Instead, Evil Scholar stepped forward and saluted. "Master, this friend of mine is called Wang Tuzi. He has a strange temper, but you don't have to lower yourself to his level. As for whether the handsome monk Wang Tuzi mentioned is your temple's Master Jiyin, he doesn't know either. After all, he's never seen him before. Evil Scholar's words made sense, so Prajna Hall's rector nodded in thanks before turning to Lin Jin. Based on what this gentleman said, there's a high chance that person is nephew Jiyin. After all, there's also White Ape. There's no such coincidence in this world. Lin Jin nodded. He thought so too. Even if it was a misunderstanding, he had to confirm it. Thus, he asked Wang Tuzi where he met the old Taoist priest. Wang Tuzi remembered this very clearly. They were at Qilong town on the border between Grassy Continent and South Continent. We only glanced at each other at the time and didn't pay much attention to them. As for where they went after that, I don't know. But Qilong town is connected to Central Continent, Grassy Continent, and South Continent. If they're from Central Continent's Jade Dragon Kingdom, they might be heading to South Continent. After all, if they're heading to Grassy Continent, it should be along the way for me. Although Wang Tuzi looked quite ugly, he was also a smart person. Following that, he relied on his memory to describe the physical characteristics of the handsome monk and the little white ape. Putting aside the handsome monk, at least from Wang Tuzi's description, the sixth graders were 70% sure that the little white ape that was being led around by the old Taoist priest with a rope tied around its neck was the white ape. Coupled with the monks from Daluo Temple, they were 70 to 80% sure that the handsome monk Wang Tuzi met was Jiyin. With this, the possibility of that happening increased exponentially. After all, Lin Jin had studied probability before. According to Wang Tuzi, he met the white ape 2 days ago. If the other party was on foot, they couldn't have traveled 1,000 miles in 2 days. Although the chances of them giving chase now weren't high, it was better than wasting time. Time was of the essence, and Lin Jin planned to set off immediately. Suddenly, Shang'er sensed something, and with a flick of her tail, Lin Jin and Goldie levitated into the air. This was Shang'er's subject manipulation skill as a rank 5 monster. Shang'er, wait a moment. Lin Jin caressed the little fox's head. Then, he glanced at the group and invoked a spell. The water reservoir armor in his arms emitted a wave of energy. Mist rose from the ground. Condensing cloud. Lin Jin clenched his fist, and the group felt a gust of humid water vapor gushing out from beneath their feet. When they looked up again, a green cloud had condensed 1,000 feet above their heads. The green cloud fluttered and rolled like silk. A faint gust of wind blew as if rain was about to fall. By now, Lin Jin was hovering in the air. Standing several feet in the air, he saluted the monks and the experts who had come to help. Everyone, I will go and investigate now. I'm extremely grateful that everyone has come all the way here. I shall thank you all with this spirit energy rain. Having said that, Lin Jin prepared to fly away. Chunru Yuan suddenly spoke up. I wonder if Curator can inform you of Appraiser Lin's current situation? Lin Jin glanced down at Chunru Yuan. The man obviously knew that Lin Jin was the one who dealt with the divine lightning. Now that Curator was at Daluo Temple, how was Appraiser Lin doing? Chunru Yuan wasn't the only one who wanted to know. Yi Yuzhou and the others wanted to know as well. In fact, the Jade Dragon Emperor He Qian was the one who wanted to know. In the air, Lin Jin smiled and said, that disciple of mine suffered some injuries from resisting the divine lightning. It's no big deal. Having said that, he suddenly sped up, moving several times faster than a bird. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared before everyone's eyes. That's amazing. Daluo Temple's monks' hearts thumped wildly at this sight. It wasn't just them. Many villainous experts and monster cultivators knew that flying was the most difficult skill to master. Flying birds had wings. Experts also needed mana to support their flight. Whether it was magic tools, clouds, or anything else, it was the same principle. Flying through the air was simple and direct, but achieving that kind of speed was difficult. Be it altitude, speed, or distance, it seemed like Curator was planning to fly all the way to South Continent. This was ridiculous. No one here, be it righteous, demonic, or monster, could do it. In fact, they didn't know that Lin Jin was just as surprised. This wasn't his cloud manipulation, but Shonger's object kinesis. Shonger was now controlling his body and Goldie. Her speed was 2 to 3 times faster than riding on an eagle beast. It didn't take long before they flew out of the cities surrounding Daluo Temple and arrived at a vast mountain range. They were probably several hundred miles away. Shonger, that's enough. Using object kinesis to control me has drained too much of your mana. Lin Jin patted Shonger's head. Also, your injuries have healed. You should be able to transform into a human now. The little fox in his arms didn't make a sound. Lin Jin maintained his speed. The eagle beast that had been tailing them was nowhere to be seen. However, this wasn't a problem. With a horn flute, Lin Jin could find it within a few hundred miles. Although the eagle beast was now a distance away, it was still tailing them. Lin Jin only slowed down when he reached the edge of grassy continent, more than 500 miles away from Daluo Temple. Shonger was clearly exhausted. Once Lin Jin landed, she curled up into a ball and fell asleep. Lin Jin knew that she had used up a lot of her mana. Afraid that she might still be injured, Lin Jin didn't disturb her and continued to carry her. Goldie had been flying passively the entire time, so he felt dizzy. Now that he had landed, he flapped his wings and squawked. After some thought, Lin Jin decided to act as curator for now. At this, Lin Jin remained in his usual attire. Instead, he summoned a cloud and flew toward Qilong town. Though his flying speed wasn't as fast as Shonger's object kinesis, it wasn't slow either. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Lin Jin arrived at Qilong town. It had only been 10 minutes since Wang Tuzi told him about Lin Jin's arrival. That was fast. In fact, right after Lin Jin left, it started raining over at Daluo Temple. Spirit energy rain. Lin Jin used the water reservoir armor to gather the surrounding spirit energy. It was one of the armor's supernatural powers. Lin Jin cast this spell to help everyone's pet beasts improve their strength. If the pet beasts had any old ailments, they could slowly recover under this spirit energy rain. Not only the foot of the mountain, but even the top of Daluo Peak was being nourished by the rain. Be it the monks of Daluo Temple or the villainous experts and monsters below, they were all stunned by this spirit energy rain. Curator is truly amazing. Amidst the crowd, a monster exclaimed in admiration as he felt the rain falling on his body. Chapter 428. Wang Tuzi, who provided the clues earlier, felt the spirit energy rain falling on him. At first, he felt itchy all over, but soon, he felt an indescribable sense of comfort. It was as if he was soaking in a bath. Not only him, but his pet beast, the vulture, also felt the same way. Wang Tuzi's pet beast had been severely injured many years ago. Not only did it not recover from its old injuries, but its constant consumption of rotting meat had also accumulated a lot of corpse poison in its body. The vulture was a scavenger, so if it wasn't injured, it wouldn't be a big deal. But once it was injured, the poison wouldn't be able to suppress it any longer. Over the years, there would often be days where the vulture would suffer excruciatingly. Not only was his pet beast in pain, but Wang Tuzi was also affected due to the power of their blood contract. That was why he looked so horrifying. The man and beast had accumulated poison in their bodies for such a long time, which was why they looked so strange. But now that they were showered in the spirit energy rain, their old injuries and the poison in their bodies were slowly recovering. It wasn't just Wang Tuzi. Even Old Turtle's fingers were trembling. He was previously treated by Shonger, and although the treatment was successful in the end, his pet beast was still weak and shriveled. However, under this spirit energy rain, not only did Old Turtle feel like he had been reborn, but his pet beast, the giant turtle, was also bursting through the clothes on Old Turtle's back. It raised its head and enjoyed this rebirth rain to its heart's content. Furthermore, one could see with the naked eye that this turtle was slowly growing in size. At first, it was only the size of a wash basin, but in no time, it grew to half a person's height. It could even carry 3 to 5 people on its back. How could Old Turtle not be excited at this sight? Madame Ghostchild came over and said, "This is the curator's supernatural power. The way I see it, there's nothing in this world that the curator can't do." Madame Ghostchild, Coffin Man, and Old Turtle were all part of the Namling Five. Back then, they were as close as siblings, but after a disaster, one of them died while the other four were injured. For many years, they lived miserable lives. If it weren't for the curator's coincidental treatment, Old Turtle wouldn't be alive today, and Coffin Man might have died as well. This was Old Turtle's first time meeting the curator. He was also excited as he recalled an old incident. "Ghostchild, Coffin Man, do you still remember the legend of Tao Lord?" Tao Lord? Hearing these two words, all the heretical experts present were taken aback. As long as one was an expert of the evil path, how could they not know of Tao Monarch? The evil path expert ranking that had been passed down for hundreds of years was created by Tao Monarch. In the evil path, Tao Monarch was an existence akin to a patriarch. He was even listed as the #1 expert in the world hundreds of years ago. "Tao Lord, you've always been wearing a mask in the past. Now, Curator is doing the same. Is there a connection between the two?" Old Turtle was bold and said whatever came to his mind. After all, this was something that had happened hundreds of years ago. None of the heretical experts present, even those who were ranked on the heretical experts leaderboard, had actually seen a Tao Lord. However, there were indeed quite a few legends regarding Tao Lords. I've heard of that as well. I've even seen a portrait of the Tao Lord. He does wear a mask with the word Tao written on it, but no one has ever seen his true appearance, a villainous expert said. The mask with the character Tao. Beneath the white wood, there was a single character, Tao, written in black ink. The reason why he had been known as Tao Lord in the past was because of this Tao character mask. It's probably just a coincidence. Curator's mask has beast patterns on it, Black Crow said. Black Crow said at this moment. Everyone nodded. After all, although Tao Lord had a resounding reputation among the villainous experts, he was still a figure from hundreds of years ago. Compared to such a legendary figure, the curator was more realistic. Everyone. Although Wong Tuzi mentioned a clue earlier, we still don't know if it's true or not. That white ape is Curator's grand disciple, and his whereabouts are unknown. Now that we've received a spirit energy rain from Curator, let's go help him search for clues. If there's any news, let's inform each other immediately, Madame Ghostchild suggested. At this, the Daluo Temple monks were more than happy to hear this. This way, the villainous experts could disperse. Moreover, their monk, Jiyin, should be with White Ape. As long as they found White Ape, they would be able to find Jiyin as well. After the discussion, the group dispersed. Meanwhile, Lin Jin had already stepped into Qilong Town. This was the intersection of 3 continents. It was a very important place belonging to an intermediate kingdom. However, this intermediate kingdom wasn't very strong. The walls of this Qilong Town were also very dilapidated. If it weren't for the fact that merchants would often pass through here, this small town wouldn't even exist. The soldiers guarding the town were spirited. Although their armor was old, they had a solemn demeanor. Their blades were sharp and their spears gleamed coldly. Lin Jin was wearing a mask and carrying the 6-tailed fox. Forget Goldie, his current appearance was too conspicuous, so Lin Jin used a camouflage spell to enter the town. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see him. Qilong Town wasn't huge. It only took a few moments to cross it. If one were to walk through the entire town, an hour was more than enough. If one were to travel on foot like Lin Jin, it would take even less time. After entering the town, Lin Jin knew that the little white ape Wong Tuzi mentioned was White Ape, because Shang'er, who was in his arms, smelled White Ape's lingering demonic energy. Although it was faint, it was definitely White Ape. This lifted Lin Jin's spirits. At the same time, he became more vigilant. According to Wong Tuzi, White Ape was being leashed by an old Taoist with a rope around his neck like a dog. Other than that, Jiyin was right behind them. There were a few possibilities. One was that the old Taoist was skilled enough to subdue White Ape and Jiyin and coerce them. Another was that the old Taoist and Jiyin were in cahoots, and they worked together to kidnap White Ape. These two possibilities were the most likely to Lin Jin. Either way, the other party was skilled enough to be at least at the level of Daluo Temple's rector. He had to be careful. Following the scent, Chandra led Lin Jin to a tavern in the city. There weren't many patrons in the tavern, so the tables were mostly empty. On one of the tables was a piece of rice paper under a wine glass. Beside it was a brush. White Ape's aura could be sensed on the paper. Forget Chandra, even Lin Jin could sense it. Lin Jin went over to take a look and frowned. There were a few lines written on the paper. These words were imbued with magic, so ordinary people wouldn't be able to see them. But at Lin Jin's cultivation level, he could see them clearly. Lin Jin wasn't surprised by the man's skills, but the words he left behind. 1,000 miles to the south, Gu Tsong Mountain, a warm cup of tea for an esteemed guest, a message from the Taoist. Although it didn't say who it was for, Lin Jin knew it was for him. Not only were these two lines of words surprising, but there was also a brush beside it. The bristles of the brush were made from White Ape's fur. It was no wonder White Ape's demonic energy lingered on it. These two lines were written using White Ape's brush. Chapter 429. The strokes were strong, and the level of his calligraphy was impressive. Lin Jin had done some research on calligraphy, and his handwriting was excellent to begin with. Hence, he knew that calligraphy was a reflection of the person. At this moment, Lin Jin felt like he was watching an old Taoist writing these two words with an air of arrogance on the brush he had prepared along the way. Domineering. Arrogant. Lin Jin could feel it from the words alone. Lin Jin also knew that the other party was here for him. Reaching out to pick up the White Ape brush, Lin Jin immediately sensed an aura emanating from the brush. It was like a pebble being tossed into a calm lake. Ripples rose. In an instant, the ripples spread across the entire Qilong town. **T. Lin Jin didn't expect the other party to have done something to the brush, casting a spell on it. Almost at the same time, all the pet beasts in Qilong town, including the ownerless beasts transported by the caravans, had bloodshot eyes as they let out low growls. Even pet beasts that had formed a blood contract were instantly overwhelmed by a surge of violent and bloodthirsty energy, suppressing the original strength of the blood contract. Without the suppression of the blood contract, the most primitive bestial instincts were triggered by the bloodthirsty energy, resulting in a rampage of beasts. The pet beast of the customer at the table next to them immediately leaped up and lunged at its owner. The same thing was happening in other parts of Qilong town. In the next second, rivers of blood would flow and countless people would die. And this might just be a small trick by the other party, a show of strength. Lin Jin obviously wouldn't let this happen, especially when it came to spells that involved beasts. He was the best at it, so he couldn't allow himself to be tricked by someone else in his area of expertise. Binding Curse. Lin Jin mobilized the spirit energy around him and snapped his fingers. The crisp sound reverberated across the entire Qilong town in an instant. The rampaging beasts that were about to attack were instantly immobilized, as if someone had grabbed them by the neck. This was the only way Lin Jin could think of to break the other party's spell. The binding curse was used to indiscriminately bind the beasts within a certain range. After all, when facing the beasts that had gone berserk under the control of a spell, pure coercion was no longer effective. To deal with the spell, they could only use another spell. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. In Qilong town, most of the people did not even have time to react. Some of the stronger people knew that something was wrong. After all, the power of their blood contracts had lost effect in such a short period of time. There was definitely something wrong. Hence, those with quick reflexes immediately distanced themselves from the pet beast. Most of them were still confused. After all, their blood-contracted pet beasts had gone through thick and thin with them. Their bond was so strong that they weren't on guard. After using Binding Spell, Lin Jin used Spell Negation. Borrowing Goldie's buzzing, he channeled the spell and dispelled the Berserk spell on all the pet beasts in Qilong town. From the beginning to the end of this bloodless battle, it only took the time to drink a cup of wine. However, It was in this cup of wine that too many dangers were hidden. If the slightest mistake was made, Qilong Town would be bathed in blood by ferocious beasts. Why was there a chicken crowing just now? I heard it too. This isn't the right time either. Whose chicken is so dumb? My pet beast suddenly went out of control, but after this crow, it returned to normal. Strange, strange. While the people in Qilong Town were talking, Lin Jin was already making his way out. He had already burned the brush with dragon fire. Leaving it around would only be a scourge. Who could guarantee that it wouldn't be enchanted with any other spells? The person who left the note called himself Taoist. To Lin Jin, this Taoist was definitely a top-notch beast appraiser. His cultivation in spell casting was impressive as well. He had dug a huge pit for Lin Jin. If Lin Jin didn't have a few tricks up his sleeve, he would have lost in the first round of battle. Although Lin Jin wouldn't have been injured if he couldn't control the thousands of pet beasts in Qilong Town, his state of mind would have suffered a blow that was worse than an injury. Hence, this Taoist was an expert. Gutsong Mountain, huh? All right, since you're waiting for me with a warm cup of tea, I'll go meet you, Lin Jin thought. His eagle beast had finally arrived. Hovering above Qilong Town, Lin Jin had Shangur climb onto his shoulder. Carrying Goldie in his arms, Lin Jin leaped onto the cloud and headed south on the eagle's back to Mount Gukong. On the eagle's back, Lin Jin recalled that Wang Tuzi was the person he met 2 days ago in Qilong Town. In other words, the man might have left behind a trap in Qilong Town before heading straight for Gutsong Mountain. If he was right, the man would definitely set up some traps on Gutsong Mountain. There was even a possibility that Gutsong Mountain was the Taoist's lair. Knowing that he was an enemy and that he had the geographical advantage, things were getting tricky. However, Lin Jin had no other choice. If he didn't go, the man might harm White Ape. For White Ape's sake, Lin Jin had to go even if he had to climb a mountain of daggers and swim into a sea of flames. Based on Lin Jin's current understanding, this Taoist was skilled. While his cultivation level might not be higher than Daluo Temple's rector, in terms of beast appraising, this man was probably far better than a rank 3 beast appraiser. He might even be a rank 4 beast appraiser. Fortunately, Lin Jin had a trump card of his own. Shangur had been recuperating for the past few days, practically hugging the water reservoir armor to sleep. The water spirit nourished her veins and organs, so her injuries were no longer a problem. Her cultivation level had also improved. After all, she had leveled up from rank 4 to rank 5, so Shangur was at least 10 times stronger than before. In fact, she could have transformed into a human a long time ago. However, she purposely chose not to, wanting to be carried by Lin Jin every day. Things have been hectic for the past few days, so Lin Jin decided to let her have her way for now. Once White Ape was rescued, he wouldn't let her do as she pleased. There was also Goldie. Goldie had also reached rank 4 this time, but he didn't cultivate the beast energy formation. Instead, he relied entirely on the Golden Crow's bloodline. Despite being rank 4, if he were to be provoked, even Daluo Temple's rector wouldn't be able to do anything to him. With these two around, working together with Xiaohua shouldn't be a problem. Speaking of which, Lin Jin's pet beast, Xiaohua, was a little too weak. He was only rank 4 now. Although he had an yin-yang dharma body, he might not be a match for the Golden Crow's bloodline in a one-on-one fight. Xiaohua's starting point was too low and he didn't have any bloodline heritage. The only reason he was able to make it this far was because of Lin Jin's Museum of Deadly Beasts. After all, it was rare for a firewolf to evolve to rank 4. As for rank 5, there probably hadn't been a single one in history. With the eagle, it only took 2 hours to cover a distance of 1,000 miles. The eagle was exhausted from the long journey. Lin Jin fed it a spirit pill and poked its acupoints with silver needles to keep it going. Lin Jin had never been to the southern continent before. When he was at Qilong Town, he could already feel the humidity and heat. After flying for another 1,000 miles and arriving at Mount Gutsong, Lin Jin realized that the climate here was humid and hot. It was completely different from the barren lands of grassy continent. The mountains beneath him were covered in lush greenery. As the saying went, you can't see the mountains for the trees. White mist rose during the day, and dew gathered at night. Mount Gutsoan was especially noteworthy. There were countless ancient trees that were hundreds and thousands of years old. The locals didn't dare to venture too deep into the mountains, mainly because there were too many venomous insects here. If they were careless and got bitten, it would be disastrous. Chapter 430. Mount Gutsoan was filled with miasma, so birds and beasts couldn't fly there. Even if they did, they would be knocked down by the rising miasma and die a horrible death. This was one of South Continent's most dangerous places. However, no matter how dangerous a place was, there were still traces of humans. Their ancestors had long said that fortune and misfortune came hand in hand. Taoism emphasized the two extremes of yin and yang. Even though it was a dangerous place, there were still many hidden benefits. For example, the mountain was filled with spirit herbs and spirit beasts. Herb gatherers and hunters often visited Mount Gukong Linjin, didn't let the eagle beast fly in directly. For one, Mount Gutsoan was filled with miasma, so the eagle beast might not be able to withstand it. Another reason was that the Taoist might have set up a trap. Comparatively speaking, it was less risky to enter the mountain from land. More importantly, the miasma here was too strong. Even the strongest flying beast couldn't withstand it, let alone the eagle beast. On the mountain road, in front of them was the miasma-filled Mount Guchong world. Beside it stood a crooked stone tablet with the words Mount Guchong written in ancient characters. There were many damaged places on the stone tablet, and withered vines grew all over it. Goldie had been feeling inexplicably excited since the beginning. He was eager to give it a try. If Lin Jin hadn't restrained him, he would have charged into Mount Gutsoan by now. Just then, Lin Jin saw a herb gatherer resting on a rock up ahead. The man was wearing a straw hat and short robes. He had a strong physique, and it was obvious that he was a frequent traveler. Beside him was a medicinal basket and a bag of dried rations wrapped in leaves. There were glutinous rice balls wrapped in dried meat and dried vegetables. They were wrapped in rice and steamed in a pot. Lin Jin carried them with him so that he could eat one whenever he was hungry. It was quite convenient. Lin Jin approached with Shang in his arms. The herb gatherer noticed Lin Jin's approach, so he glanced at him warily before reaching for the medicine knife on his back. The herb gatherer's medicine knife resembled a sickle used to cut wheat, but was smaller. As they had to travel the mountains all year round, the medicine men's medicine knives were extremely sharp. They had no problem cutting herbs, and could even deal with beasts and bandits. Lin Jin wore a mask and carried a pretty little fox in his arms. Beside him was a rooster. The rooster was obviously excited as it kept flapping its wings, eager to try something out. This style and combination would definitely arouse suspicion and make people fearful. The herb gatherer was very fearful. Other than gripping the hilt of his knife, the squirrel in his basket also poked its head out. It was a little restless. Clearly, this squirrel was his pet beast. Lin Jin didn't stop. He continued forward, walking past the herb harvester and heading for Mount Gukong. When the herbalist saw that he was just a passerby, he let out a sigh of relief. He did not have enough time to see where he was going, so after some thought, he asked, "Sir, are you going to Mount Gutsoan?" Lin Jin paused and nodded. "That's right." The herbalist continued. "Mount Gutsoan is a dangerous place. If you don't have anything urgent to do, try not to go there." This was a kind advice. The herbalist often gathered herbs at the edge of Mount Gutsoan, so he was very familiar with this place. When he saw this person rashly enter the mountain, he tried to dissuade him out of goodwill. Lin Jin understood what the herbalist was trying to say. He smiled and said, "I do have something important to tell you." "I see." At this, the herbalist could only say, "Then, sir, you must be careful of the miasma and all kinds of poisonous insects. There are many insect-repellent plants by the roadside, those 7-leaf plants. Pick some up and wear them to repel poisonous insects." As he spoke, the herbalist pointed at some herbs by the roadside. He clearly meant well. Lin Jin saluted him and thanked him. Then, without further ado, he stepped into the miasma, shrouding Mount Gukong. The herbalist watched as Lin Jin left. He sighed and mumbled to himself, "Sigh. I wonder where this pugilist came from. People used to say that there were immortals in Mount Gukong, but I think they were all lies. All these years, countless people have entered the mountain because of this legend, only to lose their lives. Forget it. I've said what I have to say. Just do your best." Having said that, the herbalist stuffed the remaining rice balls into his mouth. When he turned to look, he was stunned. His pet beast, the squirrel that had been trained to search for herbs, looked a little strange at this moment. There was a cloud of medicinal energy surrounding its body. Apart from that, the herbs that had been collected in the basket were all filled with spirit energy. Some of them were even growing. This was something he had never seen before. In all his years, this was the herbalist's first time seeing something like this. If someone with a bit of knowledge saw a squirrel's current state, they would know that this was a sign of a pet beast's evolution. Or rather, this pet beast was evolving. Only after reaching rank 2 could one use elemental powers. This squirrel was obviously of the wood attribute, which explained the medicinal aura and the strange sight of growing herbs. By now, Lin Jin had stepped into Mount Gukong. There really is a lot of miasma here. Lin Jin couldn't see anything more than 10 feet in front of him. Miasma and white fog were everywhere, so there was a reason why this place was called a danger zone. Under the miasma, many poisonous insects were darting through the grass. Rustling sounds echoed in Lin Jin's ears as well. Even with Lin Jin's mental fortitude, he felt his scalp tingle. Shang was clearly displeased as well. Goldie, on the other hand, was as happy as a little chick that had never seen the world. He began to hunt for food in a frenzy. Lin Jin didn't stop him. He could eat as much as he wanted. It wasn't easy to find insects in other places anyway. Now that he was here, Lin Jin let him eat as much as he wanted. After all, Goldie had contributed a lot back at Daluo Temple. The only thing that worried Lin Jin was that these poisonous insects might hurt Goldie if they were too poisonous. But after giving it some thought, he realized that his worries were unfounded. Goldie had a unique constitution, and since he dared to eat, he wasn't afraid of being poisoned. Even if he was poisoned, with Lin Jin around, nothing would happen to him. Goldie ran around happily, holding all sorts of poisonous insects, centipedes, and scorpions in his mouth. He was having a great time feasting on them all. After entering the mountain, Lin Jin could sense White Ape's aura. The other party had deliberately allowed White Ape to reveal himself. In other words, the Taoist knew that Lin Jin was here. Following the aura, Lin Jin walked forward. After passing through the dense forest and mountain stream, he arrived at a valley. Something unexpected happened. Or rather, it was inevitable. The miasma around them was getting thicker. Rustling sounds could be heard coming from the miasma. Lin Jin could tell that there were a lot of poisonous insects here. The poisonous miasma insects seemed to have been activated by some kind of spell, as they were unusually active. Lin Jin waved his sleeves, sending out a strong gust of wind to blow away the surrounding miasma. Once the miasma was gone, one could finally see the dense swarm of poisonous insects around them. It could be said that they were stacked on top of each other like a tide. There weren't just tens of thousands of them. There were millions of them. The next instant, the poisonous insects swarmed toward them. Dragon fire. Lin Jin reacted quickly. He invoked a spell, and flames danced on his fingertips. With the point of his finger, the flames shot out and scattered like sparks that had been thrown into kerosene. They spread rapidly, igniting their surroundings in an instant. Lin Jin wasn't afraid of fire. With Xiao Hua's Dharma body, he wouldn't be hurt even if he was burned. Chapter 431. The Dragon Fire spell spread rapidly, burning countless poisonous insects and causing them to squeak in pain. Strange crackling noises could be heard from the flames as if beans were being fried, accompanied by a pungent, burnt smell. It was a terrifying scene. However, despite the Dragon Fire spell, the poisonous insects weren't afraid of death. They continued to charge forward, forming a stalemate with the flames. This was Lin Jin's first time witnessing something like this. Lin Jin had tried using his aura to intimidate the venomous bugs, but to no avail. He could only assume that these bugs were being controlled by some kind of spell. Goo bugs were difficult to control and intimidate, and now that the enemy had the upper hand, Lin Jin could only passively defend himself. Needless to say, this was the second greeting gift that Taoist had prepared for him. If the violent spell that was attached to the brushback in Qilong Town was only a deterrent to embarrass him, then the invasion of thousands of insects in this insect valley was truly deadly. With so many poisonous insects, once they got close, Lin Jin would be devoured in the blink of an eye, and his soul would be obliterated. The only one who was excited was Goldie. His body enlarged like a bull in heat. Letting out a strange cry, he flapped his wings and charged into the swarm of insects. This was Goldie's own doing. Lin Jin was startled by this, but it was too late to stop him. Let it be. Lin Jin was helpless. However, Goldie had a unique physique, so it was difficult for the poisonous insects to hurt him. In this situation, Lin Jin could walk on the clouds, but he didn't want to. Walking on the clouds was equivalent to being afraid of his opponent. He had won the previous round, so he wouldn't go easy on his opponent this time. As he reached out to grab the air, it was as if several buckets of kerosene had been poured onto the surrounding flames, causing them to burst into flames. The ferocious flames finally gained the upper hand. Under the impact of the flames, the poisonous insects were like mantises trying to stop a chariot. They were utterly defeated. The flames spread, and soon, the entire insect valley was burnt to a crisp within 1,000 feet radius. No one knew how many poisonous insects had been burned to death. In any case, there were charcoal-like remains of poisonous insects everywhere, and there were definitely tens of millions of them. Big Yellow had eaten quite a lot after struggling for a long time, but they were all burned. The poisonous insects that were not dead were defeated and fled in all directions. Big Yellow was displeased, but it did not care that its neck was about to explode from eating too much. In a dense forest like this, flames could easily ignite a huge fire. However, Dragon Fire wasn't just any ordinary fire. It was the flames of Lin Jin's mana that burned at his will. To put it simply, if he wanted to burn, it would burn. That rope must be some kind of powerful artifact. Lin Jin took another look at the old Taoist. Although he was wearing a Taoist robe, he looked vicious and sinister. He didn't seem like a kind person at all. However, he was very particular about his clothes. His robe was plain and clean, with a large Tao character written on it with a calligraphy brush. His hair was gray and his cheeks were thin, but his eyes were shining brightly. Judging by his appearance, this old Taoist wasn't easy to deal with. Noticing the pained expression on the monk's face, Lin Jin asked, "Are you Daluo Temple's Master Jin?" The monk was stunned. Enduring the pain, he pressed his palms together and returned the greeting. "I'm not a master. I am Jin of Daluo Temple. May I know who you are?" "Curator." Lin Jin could tell that Jin and this old Taoist weren't on the same wavelength. They had even fought before, but Jin had probably lost miserably. Lin Jin could even tell that Jin was in a precarious situation. Master Xian Ju had been nice to him too. Although the abbot was a little arrogant at first, after admitting defeat, he was a reasonable person. Hence, if there was a chance, Lin Jin would save Jin. Lin Jin walked over calmly without the slightest hint of nervousness. Goldie didn't come up. Lin Jin had him wait at the foot of the mountain. If needed, he just had to issue a command and Goldie would rush up to save the day. Right now, Shang'er was the only one in Lin Jin's arms. In her fox form, Shang'er looked seductive. She glared at the old Taoist with a fierce glint in her eyes, while her 6 tails fluttered in the wind. The old Taoist saw this, but ignored it. He laughed and pointed to a tea set beside him. "Curator, you came just in time. The tea is just right. Come, have a seat." Chapter 432. Lin Jin smiled. Fearing that the other party wouldn't know, he was smiling because he was wearing a mask. Lin Jin let out a chuckle this time. However, as it was a fake laugh, it sounded a little odd, but it also made him look creepy. Sit? Lin Jin wouldn't sit. The old Taoist was trying to be mysterious, but Lin Jin had no time to entertain him. Patting the little fox in his arms, Lin Jin had already scouted the area to see if there were any traps the old man had set up. He had to be careful with every step he took. As for the tea the old man brewed, it was definitely undrinkable. Who knew if there was something hidden in it? Lin Jin knew that it was best not to follow the old Taoist instructions. The old Taoist poured him a cup of tea, but Lin Jin didn't take it. Instead, he pointed at White Ape and said, "White Ape is my grand disciple, and I like him a lot. It's not right of you to take his love away without saying a word." As he spoke, he reached out and grabbed White Ape. As if he was being lifted up by a force, White Ape flew over. The old Taoist frowned. The next moment, the rope around White Ape's neck glowed with a golden light, tugging at White Ape so that he couldn't be pulled over. In an instant, the two forces were locked in a stalemate. Lin Jin obviously didn't know how to use telekinesis. He was just putting on an act earlier, but Shang was the one who did it. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Shang's object manipulation skill was at the peak of perfection. However, she didn't dare to use too much force as White Ape's eyes were already rolling back from the rope around his neck. In a situation like this, Lin Jin could either disregard everything and forcefully pull White Ape over, or he could only let go and think of something else later. Lin Jin said coldly, "If we don't get along, I won't let you off the hook. If you hurt White Ape, I won't let you off today." He didn't say this to threaten the old Taoist, but to divert his attention. Because as he spoke, Lin Jin had already flicked his Thunderfire needle at the old Taoist. When he said he would make a move, he acted without the slightest hesitation. The fact that the other party was pretending to warm the tea and wait for him was nothing more than another trap. If he really sat there foolishly and talked with the other party, he would only be led step by step into the ditch. The old Taoist was an expert, so it was always wise to strike first. The old Taoist didn't expect Lin Jin to attack without any warning. He flew into a rage, but the next moment he broke out in cold sweat. The momentum of the incoming Thunderfire needle was too great. The old Taoist didn't even have time to speak before a ball of light burst forth from his body. Then there was the sound of cicada chirping. Thunderfire splattered in all directions, shattering rocks and burning trees. Shang-Er's tail swept past, sweeping Jin far away so that he wouldn't be affected. Apart from that, Shang-Er's object manipulation technique was in full effect. The White Ape couldn't break free from the rope that was emitting golden light, and the rope was tied to a large tree. Using the object manipulation technique, Shang-Er uprooted the tree that weighed at least 10,000 kilograms. Even Lin Jin hadn't expected this to happen. But now, he wasn't afraid anymore. Even if the old Taoist used a spell to control the rope, there was nothing he could do to stop Shang-Er from snatching the wok away. He really took away the pot and the stove, leaving nothing behind. The old Taoist priest didn't expect this either. He used the golden light on his body to block the lightning fire needles. Now that he saw his magic treasure being taken away, he had a mental breakdown. Shameless. Despicable. The old Taoist cursed. Despite his anger, the old Taoist knew that the immortal binding rope was the most powerful magic treasure he had. This item was left behind by his grandmaster. Be it humans, monsters, immortals, ghosts, or demons, they could all be bound by it. To put it bluntly, this was the most important thing he had. The old Taoist couldn't care less. If he continued to tie up the White Ape, his magic treasure would be taken away. Hence, he could only invoke a spell. The next moment, the rope that bound the White Ape loosened like a snake and slithered away, flying into the old Taoist's sleeve. Lin Jin sighed inwardly. He could tell that Shang-Er wasn't just trying to save the White Ape. She was also trying to take away his magic treasure. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Still, it didn't matter as long as the White Ape was free. Without the rope restraining him, the White Ape's demonic aura erupted once more. Almost instantly, he transformed into his giant ape form. Glaring at the old Taoist with bloodshot eyes, he roared and pounced at the old Taoist. Lin Jin could tell that the old Taoist had been torturing White Ape lately, or else he wouldn't be this angry. Old thing, I'm going to smack you to death. Without the magic treasure's restraint, the White Ape's demonic aura soared, and he could speak now. He raised his fist and swung it down. This punch could even shatter a mountain peak. The old Taoist raised an eyebrow in anger. You're just a beast. How dare you talk big? As he spoke, the golden light shone again. Then, countless black insects swarmed over from all directions and wrapped themselves around the White Ape's arm. As the insects gnawed on him, the White Ape let out a strange cry. At this, Lin Jin quickly spat out a ball of dragon fire, temporarily saving the White Ape from danger. White Ape, stand down. Lin Jin knew that the old Taoist was a master of insect control. While White Ape was impressive, he wouldn't be a match for the old Taoist if he had to fight him. The fact that the old Taoist managed to subdue both Bai Yu and Ji Yin from Daluo Temple proved how powerful he was. Clearly, this thing wasn't afraid of fire and was definitely an incredible treasure. At the critical moment, a big tree flew up from below and blocked the rope. The rope was like a snake swinging its tail. With just one whip, the tree trunk that the two of them had to encircle was smashed into pieces. At this, Lin Jin's pupils dilated and he immediately retreated. He couldn't be tied up by this rope, nor could he be whipped. Aha! Just by looking at you, I can tell that it hasn't been long since you received the inheritance. How can you compare to me, who has a Daelord's legacy and a Daelord artifact? You have the inheritance, but you don't know how to use it. What a waste. Watch my immortal binding rope bind. At the old Taoist command, the rope sped up and reached Lin Jin in the blink of an eye. It coiled around Lin Jin's waist, and with a twist, Lin Jin's arms and legs were bound too. After being bound by the rope, Lin Jin immediately felt his spirit energy being suppressed. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on his body, making it difficult for him to even move. Artifact. Lin Jin had been listening carefully. The old Taoist called the rope a magic treasure. One must know that magic treasures had existed since ancient times and were the most precious treasures of immortals. Even among immortals, there were very few of them, which was why they were called magic treasures. All of them were magic treasures with special abilities. Although he was restrained by the immortal binding rope, Lin Jin wasn't afraid. He wasn't the only one. Lin Jin was about to fall from the sky when Shang'er intercepted him with object manipulation. With a sweep of her tail, Lin Jin flew away. Not again. The old Taoist jumped in fright. He was doing it again. One had to know that the more powerful a magic treasure was, the harder it was to refine it. It was even harder to completely control it. If the immortal binding rope was too far away from him, he wouldn't be able to control it anymore. It was like trying to hit a dog with a meat bun. If the dog wasn't caught, the meat bun would be gone too. Come back. The old Taoist conjured a spell, but this time, Shang'er's attack arrived before he could use it. More than 10 trees came crashing down from all directions. Seeing this, the old Taoist had no choice but to use his skills to block the attack. Deep down, he was panicking. That immortal binding rope was more important than his life, so he couldn't lose it. The problem was, he had never met an opponent like this before. This was a perfect example of borrowing arrows from a straw boat. Who was he supposed to blame for this? But the more anxious he was, the easier it was for him to make mistakes. His biggest problem was that he had targeted Lin Jin from the start and not Shang'er. Based on Lin Jin's current combat strength, unless Lin Jin activated his nebula barrier and went all out, he might not be able to match Shang'er in terms of combat strength. The sea of insects around the old Taoist paused for a moment as a rooster flew out of nowhere and landed on the old Taoist. Its eyes were filled with anticipation and excitement as it pecked at the old Taoist's shoulder. The rooster was naturally Big Yellow. Big Yellow's peck was extremely powerful. Not to mention flesh and blood, even a rock would be smashed by it. The old Taoist let out a cry of pain and reacted under the immense pain. He immediately reached out and grabbed Big Yellow. Big Yellow, on the other hand, had a thumb-sized golden cicada in its mouth. The golden cicada was trembling. Although its aura was much stronger than Big Yellow's, it could not resist at all because it had met its natural enemy. "You, give me back my golden cicada king." The old Taoist glared at Big Yellow, gnashing his teeth. Big Yellow's response was to open its mouth and swallow the trembling golden cicada. Big Yellow had been eyeing this thing since a while ago and had been hiding while waiting for an opportunity. Just now, it was Big Yellow who seized the opportunity to fly out and peck the golden cicada out of the old Taoist's body. I'll kill you." At this sight, the old Taoist went insane. He channeled his strength into his hands, truly enraged. If the immortal binding rope was extremely important to him, then this golden cicada was his lifeblood. This was his pet beast that he had been refining for over 100 years. It was also because of this rank 5 golden cicada king that he could control thousands of insects and use various skills. How could such an important golden cicada be eaten by this damned chicken? He couldn't stand it. "I'll tear you apart." The old Taoist's physique wasn't weak either. With the strength of his hands, he could even break a rock and tear a live cow apart. However, just as he exerted more strength, Big Yellow let out a cluck and a ball of fire burst out of its body. Then its body expanded. Under the flames, the old Taoist screamed in pain and quickly let go. When he looked again, his arms were charred black. They were crippled. Shocked, the old Taoist didn't even have time to react before he was devoured by the poisonous insects around him. Without the golden cicada king, he couldn't control thousands of insects anymore. Now that he was no longer restrained and controlled by tens of thousands of poisonous insects, they ate whatever they could get their hands on. The old Taoist was the closest to them, so he couldn't run even if he wanted to. No one expected this to happen. In the blink of an eye, the old Taoist's flesh was devoured by the poisonous insects. Without anyone to control them, the insects scattered in all directions. Some burrowed into the underground wormholes while others ran around aimlessly. By the time the insects dispersed, the area was a mess. Shangar glanced at Big Yellow before immediately going to look for Lin Jean. She had used object manipulation to send Lin Jean 1,000 feet away.